Good morning. I'm Senator Donzella James. I chair Urban Affairs. And this morning, before we begin this meeting, I want to call it to order, but we're going to have roll call by our secretary of this committee, and that is Diego Santana. Roll call.
Yes, Senator Halpern,
Present.
Senator Lucas. Yeah. Senator Merritt.
Here.
Senator Rahman. And Senator Butler. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And myself, and then we have guests. All right.
Yes, Senator Jones and Senator Estevez. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Before we get started too, I would like to ask Mr. Kip Carr if he would come up and open us up in prayer, and then we'll start the meeting. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senators. My name is Kip Carr. I am the first Vice President of the Georgia NAACP. And it's so good to see all of you. And I believe I know every single one of you this morning. So can we bow our heads? And before we begin, let us have a moment of silence for all of the victims in the devastating hurricane that is still being affected in Georgia. Thank you. And keep your heads bowed. Lord, may your hand be upon us throughout this meeting. Let the deliberations, the utterances of both senators and participants be everything to bring glory to your name. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carr. We're going to ask our chairwoman, I'm keep calling her chairwoman, she's our leader, our minority leader, who is sitting with us ex officio this morning to open us up, and then I'll turn it back over to me and I can call Kathy Woodard. Are you here yet? Are you here yet? No? Then we'll get started with the list as it is in front of us. Madam Chair, I don't know whether others want to say hello before we get started either. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning to everyone. It is certainly a pleasure to see all of you. I mean, you could be doing something else on this day, but you chose to come and discuss, learn, and try to understand what's really going on with the Georgia Elections Board. We know what's going on, but we need to say it out loud. So thank you so much for being here this morning. I'll come back later when Madam Chair allows me to speak. But thank you so much for being here, and I hope that we have a meeting of the minds before we leave here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll start just saying your name and what you serve on, starting with Jason. Are you number 12, 11?
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Jason Estevez, State Senator for Senate District 6. Will soon be Senate District 35, representing Southwest Atlanta.
State Senator Neil Jones out of Augusta, Georgia, representing District 22.
Senator David Lucas, Senate District 26, represent Macon, Houston, Twiggs, Wilkerson, Hancock, Washington, and Johnson County.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Senator Nikki Merritt from the 9th District, and I represent Gwinnett County.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Sonia Halpern, representing District 39, which is fully here in Fulton County and runs across neighborhoods of the 5 cities of Atlanta, College Park, City of South Fulton, East Point, and Union City.
Good morning, Senator Sheikh Rahman. I represent Gwinnett County, part of Lawrenceville, Norcross, Tucker, Duluth, Lilburn, and I'm glad to be with you this morning. Thank you.
And thank you. And again, I'm Senator Donzella James of the 35th, but soon to be the 28th. But I'd like to say this Urban Affairs Committee represents all 159 counties and the concerns that all of us have. So thank you for being here this morning. We have a list of people who will talk about the election procedures that were voted on a couple of weeks ago, and we'll start immediately. And we have concerns about it. This committee also addressed things like information when we had ARPA, American Rescue Plan. Most people didn't understand it and wanted to know more. Well, we've been called upon to give information about the election procedures that will be in our general election immediately. And there are court hearings going on as we speak to address some of them, two of those procedures that were policies that were passed by the election board. So we'll get started now. I don't see Kathy Woodard yet, and she was having to run in and out. So we will address her let her address us as soon as she comes. But first, I would like to call on our whip of the, excuse me? Somebody was saying something. Okay. So I know that it was devastation in Augusta, where you're from, and a lot, I got it right, don't I? And I know that you have to get back and, do something early today. And the only reason some of the others are not here is because they also had problems. And also it's Jimmy Carter's birthday, and like Senator Freddie Power Sims could not be here because she has to plant a tree in her city for him. So, Mr. Whip, will you start us out? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm kind of live to some extent. I would say everyone, please give their prayers to all citizens of Georgia. This storm has been very devastating, not only to Augusta, but so many other places. When I kind of look at what the State Board of Elections has done, I think one of the ways I've frame these kind of issues as far as elections are concerned, and understanding that what they've done is actually an infringement upon voting rights and how serious it is that I want to just kind of frame it in three levels. And this is kind of like how I would suggest as you go through your hearing to kind of also think about this, and among so many other things. And there'll be people up here to talk who know even more than I do about what they've done. But I would start, number one, just from a strict number standpoint. So we know for a fact that one of the things that we've been talking about as far as these changes are concerned have always been based upon this lie, this fiction about quote unquote election fraud. So the question becomes then, what then do the kind of hard numbers show? And let's take someone who would really want, or an organization who would really want to find this fraud, who'd be dying to find this fraud, right? And so I looked at a conservative organization out there, Heritage Foundation actually did a sampling. They'll say it was just a sampling, but they did a sampling of quote unquote what they would just call voter fraud, which some of the things are not. But one of the things they found was they found about 1,500 cases since 1997 in the United States. Put that in perspective. 13 elections have passed by since then. Over 100 million votes per year on average nationwide. That means during that time, 1.3 billion votes. And I was not good at math, that's why I'm a lawyer. But I think that's what my calculator gave me. But the bottom line is what we're talking about from their own data, from an organization wants to find it, right? They're dying to find it. What you're finding is 0.000, that's 3 zeros, 2 more zeros, 0.18 chance of any type of fraud. Now they'll say, well, this is just a sampling, but I think you're probably even less than 1% of 1% of 1% possibly. So what we're talking about is we're trying to make these decisions from a nationwide perspective based on those type of numbers. And I'm going to tell you the significance of that also. From a Georgia standpoint, they found 23 supposed cases, and put that in perspective over that same period of time, there would be about 32 million ballots cast. That means it would be a 0.0003% chance of quote unquote election fraud. So just strictly from a number standpoint, from those who would even be advocating this foolishness, we see that it basically has no basis in fact at all. But then let's kind of look at Georgia too, because that becomes important. And this becomes where it becomes really problematic for the state election board, because they have this data because they're the ones sitting there listening to it. What's interesting is that you can go to the state election board and you can find, anybody who actually cares to go find it, you can actually find the transcripts of all the hearings they have on election problems. You can find it. You find the hearing dates, and what you'll get is the hearing date, you'll get the case number, you'll get the city that it's in, and you'll get exactly what the supposed problem is. And these transcripts are there. And of course, the state election board has that. So what are some of the things that they have? So your second kind of framework is understand that the state election board knows the type of cases that they're really dealing with. They're not dealing with any mass election fraud. They're not dealing with people miscounting on purpose and things of that nature. Let me give you an idea, and this goes back to 2021 because these notes, unfortunately, I didn't have time. I've had that power, so I haven't been able to update quite as much. But this comes from the 2021 hearing, February 17th. You had a situation where you had someone in a senior citizens. It was one of the managers. And she said, you know what? If you can show me an I voted sticker, then you can enter a raffle for about $15. And somebody reported that, and the state election boards looked at it. And also one of the things you'll find is that our fellow citizens, they will tell on you about anything. 2020, a county actually was using a cardboard box, and actually it was Republican County, but I won't necessarily mention. You can go look at the state election board transcript here in February 17. But they were using a cardboard box as a drop box. Somebody told them. 2020, another case in 2020. Somebody was denied being able to vote because they parked their car 83 feet from the polling place with a Turn Georgia Blue placard. Another one in 2020, a person was said, hey, you can't come in here because that person had a Trump hat on the dashboard. Those are the type of cases they understand that they're actually hearing. They know for a fact they're hearing cases where it's basically just our citizens who just make mistakes. There was one case where a person walked in with a Reagan Bush sticker. Why? Who knows why? I mean, this is right 2020. That's what they did. And they said, hey, you can't come in here with that. It was Reagan Bush Biden. But you'll find that whether it's Democrat, Republican, you'll find people just making mistakes. And they know that. And using that they know, they still did what they did as far and continue to push these things as far as voter suppression is concerned. And that's when you know that's really what it is. So when you look at your hard data numbers, you start talking about 0.000%. When you look at the type of cases they're actually hearing on a constant basis that anyone can go to and read, and I encourage people to do it, and you'll just find people making mistakes. That's all it is, though. If you find somebody telling on somebody because they parked their car with a Turn Georgia Blue placard, or telling on somebody because they had a Trump hat on their dashboard, do you really believe that you're going to have this mass conspiracy going on as far as voter fraud? It's total foolishness. So those are the kind of things I want you to frame as you kind of go forward. And the third aspect I want you to frame is, and the reason why I'm here, I would be here anyway, of course, but as you know, Madam Chair, I actually texted you on Saturday, said I wasn't going to be able to come. And up to yesterday, I still wasn't going to be able to make it. And I had the opportunity yesterday to meet a lady who's 60 years old who lost her trailer, was sleeping in her car. But when I thought about that, I said, you know what? 60 years old. That means Civil Rights Act, we're celebrating that now. Then I thought about the fact that this weekend was actually, my mother, she passed away this weekend at 90. 34 when the Voting Rights Act came in. She'd been 34 when the Voting Rights Act was passed. Her right to vote was not really solidified till the Voting Rights Act was passed. And she would kill me for telling her age, but she looked good for 90. But when I put that in perspective, I said I had to come up because this is truly a threat to our democratic principles. Make no mistake. So whether it was somebody born in who's born, who's 60 years old, who's celebrating the Civil Rights Act, who's now tonight. We think we have a place for her to stay, but that's what she was born into. Or there's people out there who as an adult did not have the right to vote when they were an adult. That's what you're here to do today. And I can guarantee you there's persons now going to try to figure out how it's not just 0.000% chance of voter fraud. Maybe it's just 0.00 chance of voter fraud. But I would tell you this to them. As you're chasing these ghosts that exist, there's some ghosts out there that don't exist, that we ignore. 1.2 million Georgians do not have health care. 15% of our population is in poverty. I would love to see the same type of vigilance. I would love to see the same type of energy that goes into making sure our folks have health care and they can get out of poverty, that we go into actually chasing these particular ghosts in this fraud comment or this notion of fraud and this fiction of fraud and this lie of it. Make no mistake, healthcare is a serious issue. Poverty is a serious issue in this state. And now voter suppression is a serious issue in this state. And I want you to realize the job that you're doing today, Madam Chair, cannot go unnoticed, is not going unnoticed. And I want you, as you continue to do this, and as everybody fights from this point forward, think about that person who was born 60 years ago, when they were born into a world that the Civil Rights Act was just passed. Think about somebody who was 34, who really didn't even have the opportunity to vote. And here we are, fighting these fights again. With that, Madam Chair, I'll close my remarks. I would be glad to take questions, but I need to go back to my house with no power. But we're going to go figure out what we can do to get our people straightened out. But I thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity.
And we thank you very much for taking your time and energy to come before this serious issue when you have so many other things going on at home. And I hope that everyone gets better. And we're here for you. And we'll send water and supplies. Just let us know what you need. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Whip. Okay, our next speaker is still not present, is she? Okay. You want to do next? Okay. Yes, okay, Madam Leader, please address us if you want to, either from here or from the mic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't be as sophisticated as Mr. Whip with all the numbers, but I hope you understood him. I did grasp some of what he was talking about. I wanted to ask him a question, and the question would have been if he could agree with me that the election boards really didn't do their research. Because if they knew what they were dealing with, then they wouldn't be doing this. They wouldn't be changing rules in midstream. But, you know, when I made comments a few minutes ago, because I've been here for 26 years and I feel like one of the fixtures of this place, I didn't give you my name. So I'm Senator Gloria Butler from District 55, and I represent parts of DeKalb and Gwinnett counties, 2 counties. I'm glad I don't have 5 and 6 like some others. It's hard enough to deal with 2. But thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you having me here today, and also having me sit on the committee as ex officio. What I'm looking forward to, and I'm eager to listen, learn, and discuss the State Elections Board disaster. We are dealing with 3 members appointed by the Republican Party, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Speaker. And I hope we've all read the Lieutenant Governor's text messages in the New York Times. We know he believes Georgia voters should have been overturned in 2020, and that his guy should have won the election. We also know that he signed on to the fake elector scheme that got a lot of people in trouble. And now he's appointed a state election board member who signs on to these outrageous rules that will make cheating the voters and stealing the elections easier. In addition, the Speaker and the Republican Party have decided that they'll get in on the scheme as well. It is so disturbing to see how little Republicans believe our voters' choices are their very own choices. It seems that if the voters don't vote their way, then their votes must be ignored. I never thought I'd see such a thing happen in our state. It used to be that we would persuade voters. We'd give them the facts. We'd ask them for their vote. But persuading voters has stopped and cheating has taken its place. Madam Chair, I find the Republicans' disrespect for our system repulsive and their lack of faith in voters disgusting. I just want to thank you again for inviting me today. And I look forward to hearing from this impressive panel of experts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Leader. The next person is Tori Salas, Cobb County Chair of the Board of Education. Isabel Otero. There you are. Hello. You introduce yourself and let everybody know. And you, I'm sorry, we only have 3 to 5 minutes for
Yes, ma'am.
everyone. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank
Good
you, Madam
morning.
Chair. My name is Isabel Otero. I am the Georgia Policy Director for the Southern Poverty Law Center and SPLC Action Fund. And we work to advance the human rights of all people. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with some of you about the issues and consequences of the state election board. There is, as you all know, a lot to be said about the ill intentions and the political motivations of the Trump-backed members of the board in their rulemaking. But we specifically wanted to talk about some of the issues that we track very closely. As you all know, the Southern Poverty Law Center is known for tracking extremist, anti-government groups, hate groups. And unfortunately, what we've seen is quite a movement of election deniers and that movement seeping into every piece of our election work from 2020, with lots of the issues of political violence that we might have seen all the way through to SB 202, SB 189, and every other piece of the of all the different issues that we have seen. Simply put, the recent rules passed by the state election board will cause election disorder. And unfortunately, as I said, this is a very intentional movement from anti-government groups that we have tracked very closely. We're particularly concerned about 3 rules and just wanted to very quickly talk about those. First is the Heekin rule that it allows election boards to perform a, quote, reasonable inquiry without sort of defining what that means. There's the Grubbs rule that allows, that requires unnecessarily reconciliation processes for county boards to certify the results. And then the latest rule, the Alexander rule, around hand counts. And these 3 rules sort of work in combination to kind of allow bad actors to deny election results and try to use these rules for their nefarious goals. We know the election denial movements have actively encouraged, quote, supporters to infiltrate local election infrastructures to increase control over election processes and outcomes. And this includes efforts in the last year to seat local Board of Election members who will try to deny election certification. And at first glance, right, these rules seem like they're limited in scope, but there's a danger that a willing county election board or even a single member can read them to enlarge the power of the county election board beyond the scope prescribed by law, and improperly and by improperly suggesting that timely certification is somehow optional and dependent on these prerequisites that have no basis in the law. And so these rules invite these local rogue local officials to try to obstruct and manipulate certification if they disagree with the choices made by voters. And that is what's most dangerous about this situation. And so we have unfortunately have a state election board that has sort of unleashed a Pandora's box of chaos and confusion and a lot more work for election officials this election. And this unfettered discretion to not certify results can force Georgians will essentially mean that Georgians can cast their ballots, but there might be some uncertainty about how and whether they're counted on time. And it is frankly incredible that we have a state board of election that continues to allow these right-wing extremist denial groups to move forward these nonsensical rules, even as they are themselves in court writing responses and briefs about how little evidence they have for any of these crazy things they are trying to pass. And so these rules requiring hand counts are going to create problems on two different fronts. For example, first, it is additional work, but also it's going to provide an excuse because there's going to be unnecessary, considerable error when you're counting thousands and thousands of ballots. You're going to give them an excuse to deny certification or talk about the irregularities, right? And so while these counts and cross checks are important for things like auditing, requiring these on election night, it's just going to cause unnecessary delays. And these rules are based on things that bad actors, anti-government groups have put forth. This is not a bunch of folks in Georgia trying to solve problems. These are outside groups. Like, for example, some of the support for these kind of rules have come from people like Harry Horry, who is a Missourian activist and chair of the United Southern Americans Election Denial Network, and who testified before the Georgia State of Election Board in support of some of these rules. And so again, this is a real serious and very concerning situation that we find ourselves in. And we really do not want to continue to have the state election board pass rules and things this close to an election that are going to cause confusion and sow chaos. My colleagues recently put together a report called Exposing Extremism in Elections, where we detail some of these hard right and extremist ideological movements that are sort of been whitewashed and laundered into political agendas. And we have seen that the communications in the snapshot that we did, there's 108 candidates across the country who are using connections to 43 different hate groups and anti-government groups to peddle things like the Great Replacement Theory, the big lie that the whip talked about, to sort of move forward some of these rules and some of these things at the local level and at the state level. And unfortunately, our state election board has fallen prey to some of these forces and continue to sort of codify conspiracy theories. And we're very concerned. Our voters deserve better. We're really grateful that you're having this hearing because, as an organization that tracks these kind of movements, we've been concerned for a very long time, but at this point, they are putting things in progress. What's important for voters to know, though, is that there is a small army of advocates and civil rights leaders and faith leaders all supporting them and making sure that we have their back. And we want to make sure that they know that this is very serious, but we are here to help and make sure that they are able to cast their vote and nothing is going to be denied for them to use their voices. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And do we have any questions from the members? Yes, Madam Chair, Madam Leader.
Am I on?
Gotcha.
Okay. Thanks for your presentation. Excuse me, hand counting. Do you think that one hand count would be enough?
I think the problem with the hand counting is that it is going to invite considerable error into the process, especially on election night, the way that the rule has been written. That is, we're all going to be up very early that day, having a lot to do, and sort of this expectation that there will be an errorless hand count is just a little bit nonsensical. So I'm not entirely sure that one or any would be appropriate. The way that they have written the rule is, unfortunately, these rules are not written with a lot of expertise about how how elections are run, and they are continuing to sort of ignore the voices of those who are themselves coming and saying this is not how this works every time at the state election board.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about the fact that we have machines that do the counting.
Correct.
We are going backwards.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a question from,
Can y'all hear me? Yes. Back to the hand counting question, is that backed by any Georgia law that we are aware of for them to even try to mandate such a rule?
My understanding is that is not the case. I know I have a couple of my colleagues who can talk a little bit more specifics about the hand count. The part of the problem is that this hand count stuff has come from some of these extremist anti-election groups, right? And they are based on just conspiracy theories and things that don't actually make any real sense. Or, like I said, they continue to just sort of ignore all of these election officials that continue to come take time out of their day and their work to explain why these things are not going to be helpful, especially in larger counties. And they are just being ignored. Thank you so much.
unfortunately, any other questions?
Oh, that's one, two, number 4. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To your knowledge, has any county or any election administrator asked for
these rules?
rule
No,
changes?
That is, my understanding is no. And in fact, when we have seen at the legislature, some of our election officials come and ask for very practical, helpful things, that is also not what gets passed, unfortunately. Thank you so much.
Let me also say that I know that one of the election board persons that was voting no for this and asking people to vote against it had just happened to be my constituent. I represent also Douglas County besides Fulton and Douglas and Cobb. But I was hoping he could come this morning because he said not only the points that you pointed out this morning about the unnecessary delay and the possible more errors.
Yes.
Because hand counting, that's the reason we got machines in the first place. But he wanted to know about the cost of this and the delay, just how long it's going to be. Because some counties will have to hire people, they won't be able to vet them at all. Because time is of the essence now. So this is a disaster according to him. So I hope he will come. Milton, I can't remember his last name. Sorry.
ma'am. Yeah,
But,
there's a few organizations like the Coalition for the People's Agenda who's been doing some real important advocacy around election funding, because as you all know, starting well before HB 316, but especially with that bill a few years ago, all the way to this last one, SB 189, we have continued to ask for a lot more with a lot less of a budget. And there's every time we've asked for additional support on election funding, we do not get that kind of support and that kind of scrutiny. And unfortunately, if you defund elections, you are also going to be hurting voter access and causing delays and issues.
Well, thank you, and you brought us some very good points. Do
Thank
you have anything in writing that you would like to leave us, or any
Yes.
links that you want?
Yes, ma'am. So I sent them over email, but I will leave them with you all. Yes, I will leave them with you all this afternoon. Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much, and if you be here a little longer, we might ask you to come back
Yes.
for a couple of the points that you made.
Okay.
Thank you very
Happy
much.
to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next person because we still don't have Kathy Woodard yet and Tori Salas. We will go to Lauren. Well, Wagon. Tell me how to pronounce your name properly. I hope I did.
It's
Kind of
fine.
close.
Wargo.
Okay.
The hyphen throws folks off. No problem. Thank you, Chairwoman.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chairwoman James and members of the Senate Committee. We're so pleased that you're holding this conversation and so grateful for your leadership and activism on this. My name is Lauren Guerrero-Wargo. I'm the CEO of Fair Fight Action. We're an organization dedicated to promoting free and fair elections here in Georgia and around the country. Before I get into my pre-written testimony, I want to dovetail on the previous speaker just to pinpoint a conversation you all were having. Since the last presidential election in 2020, in service to the big lie, our governor, our Secretary of State, Republican state legislators, as well as now the MAGA Aligned State Election Board, have imposed numerous unfunded and unnecessary mandates on our county elections officials. And this goes back way beyond what has happened in the past month with the state election board. Counties now have to contend with counting until you drop, a whole new slew of daily requirements during early vote, and new timelines for the counting of ballots on election day, election night. Partisan poll watchers now have more and increased access as workers conduct their duties, and an untenable and likely unconstitutional triple count by hand that you just spoke about. All is against the backdrop of the state legislature banning the counties from receiving private philanthropic dollars to assist them. 4 years ago, that was a significant amount of funding. So these unfunded mandates and burdens on election workers are significant. And then we have the state election board making all of these changes in the final 100 days. So today I'm going to provide remarks on two areas. One on mass voter challenges, which have become more encouraged by the state of Georgia, and present one of the avenues that the far-right election denier movement is giving themselves to disrupt the results and intimidate voters. And then secondly, I'll talk a bit more about the state election board. Let's be clear, voter challenges are not a new concept. Voter challenges have a dirty, terrible, sordid history here in the state of Georgia and across the South. Georgia has a long history of specifically attempting to disenfranchise Black Georgians, and the current efforts of mass voter challenges have their roots in the post-Reconstruction era, when the state's leadership invoked fears of voter fraud to justify restrictions on the rights of Black men to vote. World War II veterans returning home to Georgia, predominantly Black men, there were new large number of Black men registered to vote, and the mass voter challenge was used to intimidate and harass them out of exercising that right. Dr. Carol Anderson, an expert on voter suppression and American history at Emory, says there are three features that we see in the history of voter suppression in Georgia and in our country. Number one, the threat of demographic change or demographic change happening. As I look at legislators in Gwinnett County, which not so long ago was a majority white Republican county, now a majority community of color and a Democratic county, as one example of the incredible demographic and population shifts in these states. Georgia today is majority people of color by population, and over the next many years, the voter registration rolls, should they be properly maintained and not overly purged, will start to reflect that diverse population. So that threat of demographic change that goes through our nation's history, that's always connected to increased voter suppression, is here. Number two, the lie of voter fraud has always been used. This idea that there are illegal voters, hordes of folks undeserving, how many jelly beans are in the jar, what kind of poll tax, and now the lie of immigrant voting, when we all know only citizens vote in our state and in our nation. All of these lies of voter fraud, as Senator Jones talked about, is one of the three features we see. And then the final has been consistent going back to the Jim Crow era and certainly in the post-Reconstruction era, which is race-neutral, racially targeted policy attacks. And we are certainly seeing that today out of the state election board and going back to SB 202. In 2020, we all remember during the runoff election for Georgia's 2 seats in the United States Senate, a right-wing election denier organization called True the Vote which I think really goes to this idea of voter fraud, that somehow there's fraud, so they have to true the vote, challenged 364,000 voters, we all remember this, across the state, right before that runoff election in January. This came after Georgians turned out in record numbers. And then what happened? We all worked together. I'm looking at some of the people in the room we worked with to fight back on those voter challenges. The day after the insurrection, we come back to the Georgia State Legislature, and the Republican leadership of this state, even those who stood up to certify the election, turned around and said, we want to make it easier for those kinds of mass voter challenges to happen in our state. And that's what happened in SB 202. The omnibus anti-voter bill called SB 202 had a new implementation, and rather than curtailing the mass voter challenges, you would think the reaction to that late chaos would be to curtail. They actually allowed that a single person can challenge a voter registration status of an unlimited number of voters at once. And since that, the result has been clear. There have been an alarming increase in the number of voters whose registrations have been challenged over the past 4 years. These mass voter challenges have been geographically targeted to voters in metro Atlanta areas that are Democratic leaning, Fulton, Cobb, Gwinnett, DeKalb, and Forsyth in particular. For example, one person has single-handedly challenged 10,000 registrations in Fulton County. Looking at a small snapshot of the challenges that have been filed since SB 202 was passed, in 2022, Gwinnett County received nearly 50,000 challenges, showcasing the administrative burden and cost on elections officials. The Gwinnett County Elections Director said he had to have 6 to 10 people working 60 to 70 hours per week for a month to get through all of those voter challenges. This year, Gwinnett County has received nearly 40,000 challenges from a single individual. The time and resources county have to direct towards these mass voter challenges is time and resources they can and should be spent on preparing for early vote, administering elections, doing voter education, supporting voters, but instead counties are having to direct their finite resources, scarce resources, to investigate frivolous voter challenges when there already is an established list maintenance procedure in this state, and these voter challenges are completely unnecessary and taxing. Because of the sheer number of these challenges, as well as the requirements set by SB 202, requiring counties to hold expedited hearings for some challengers within 10 days of notifying challenged voters, these already stretched county elections offices are forced to deal with a significant number of additional administrative burdens that impede the critical work of running elections. The lion's share of these challenges are being rejected. There are some times that voters get notified of these with voter letters, but ultimately we are seeing that they're mostly being rejected. But the burden on election staff is already done. And the goal of chaos, one of the number one goals of voter suppression, is chaos and confusion. These narratives in the counties and with voters, that even if those challenges are dismissed, those narrative lies continue to spread and to make certain voters throw up their hands and wonder if it's worth actually showing up and voting, as you put this air of criminalization around the voting process. Mass voter challenges obviously are not just about hamstringing these elections offices, wasting their time and resources rather than opening more polling location and early vote centers. It's clearly about intimidation, and that's at the core of the history of the mass voter challenge. There's a reason they disproportionately target Black, brown, and young voters. Fair fight, every time we get one of these lists, we do a voter file match to look at the partisanship, race, age, and gender, and we are seeing disproportionately younger voters and voters of color. So this harkens back to Jim Crow tactics and obviously connects into the state election board and what they are doing. These are part of the same conspiracy to undermine our elections, creating more doubt and more avenues for this idea that certification and the election process is up to them to decide if it was handled properly. And all of these challenges and all the litigation around challenges is meant to create that confusion and create avenues for disruption. Because it's not just the delay of certification, it's the disruption and changing of how votes are cast and counted. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Yes, one question by Jason. Please.
Madam Chair, if,
Senator, yes.
I have a couple questions, if I can ask
Okay.
those questions.
And then we're going to, I want you to know we had a distinguished panel that we had invited, and we haven't gotten to the list of people who signed up yet. So I hope y'all will be patient with us. And if someone did not sign up, please come. I'm gonna stay here if I be the only one left, but I'm gonna stay here and hear your concerns. But please know also that you can give us your concerns in writing, or if you think this is a wonderful thing, give that to us in writing as well. Thank you very much. And thank you. And we do have 2 questions. Thank you for your great presentation. And let us now take this 2 questions and we'll get back on this long list. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Lauren, I could probably consolidate this into one question. You talked about wasting time and resources, critical resources that counties need and should be spending on its citizens. I want to highlight a couple of figures, and then you talk about the impact that has on the average hardworking Georgian. In 2019, the state allocated $150 million towards election systems, towards this new election system. That includes the machines that tabulate ballots. Since then, there have been over $40 million in changes, particularly around security. So that's almost $200 million spent in 5 years. Fulton County alone in 2020 reported spending $38 million on the 2020 election. That's 4 times more than 2016. They're estimating that in 2024 will be even more. Can you talk about the costs that has on taxpayers, particularly in urban areas, and how all of these costs are essentially being spent to feed into the big lie?
So what's really challenging about the situation we find ourselves in is we have state leaders that are at once modernizing our election system with extremely costly equipment to address voter integrity concerns, and then simultaneously kowtowing to those same forces to implement a whole new layer of security and concerns that are not necessary. This idea that our election system is insecure when we have all of us in this room went through a process on these new machines. We were very vocal about them not being the most cost-effective machines, and that they were going to spend not just money by the state, but that the counties were going to have to spend their own money on the amount of printers and paper and very complicated tech that was rolled out. But what we're sort of seeing is this feeding the beast idea of the election deniers. It is never enough, right? They control the system of government. They have pushed through these bills that our governor has signed, yet they're still asking for more. And that's why you can only conclude, after having multiple bills passed just in the past 4 years, getting rid of watermarks, changing how the count happens, all of these things in the legislative process that they have advocated for, and that are all about the conspiracy theories. If you go back and look at when Rudy Giuliani came to this building in December of 2020 and stood and spouted lies, those lies all made it into legislation. All of them. And we are now in a situation where the state election board made all of that progress from their point of view in opening up the system to more intimidation, more voter suppression, less election integrity in reality. And now, the 100 days before the election, they're pushing it even further. Our team has compiled a list of all of the new requirements on election workers just passed since 2020. And it is a 10-page memo. We will be happy to provide it to the Senate. I'm not even talking about what the state election board has done. The rules have changed. It is incredibly confusing to elections officials and to voters. And the financial impact is significant, as I'm sure you have had members of the county commissions come to you to talk about the financial burden. And then we haven't even gotten to the security risks and what disinformation has done. We think about Ruby Freeman. She just became somebody we all got to know. There are so many others that have had to hire private security, or who have moved out of their homes, or who have personal threats. And so the costs The financial costs, the human costs, and the cost to the understanding around our elections is significant. And so if you step back and just look at all the changes, the only thing you can possibly conclude is that chaos is the goal, and that the end goal is to be able to do what they unsuccessfully did 4 years ago, which is overturn a close result. It obviously went all the way up to the former president trying to strong arm that result, and all down in the counties we saw it as well. So they have now unleashed this chaos and slew of new rules, guidance, state election board missives, disinformation bonanza, abusing their platforms to platform hateful right-wing folks with ties to white supremacists. All of that can only be said so that they can create a condition in the post-election or during the election and into the post-election where they have multiple avenues to try to disrupt the results. Here's what I will say. This is not going to work. This is an illegal plot. It's an illegal conspiracy. All the emails are out that the local right-wing members from Fulton County to the SCB are working with the likes of Cleta Mitchell. Okay? This is not going to work. Georgia voters have the power, and I will give you some good news, Chairwoman. We did focus groups about a month ago. We did them with white independents. We did it with Black men and Black women. We didn't, I wish I had budget to do a lot more, but on those groups, everybody was crystal clear what's happening. They are crystal clear that they're trying to cheat, and they will do whatever it takes. They're crystal clear that the governor is under an incredible amount of pressure, that he upheld the results, but that he has been giving in every way, left and right. He could have these MAGA members removed. Today, if he had listened to Kathy Willard's complaint, he had 30 days to hold a hearing and removed. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. We could have a pro voter majority. That could have happened already. So let's be clear, where the buck stops with this governor. You don't get to be the governor of a state with a strong executive model and just abdicate your responsibility. I like to remind my friends in other states, we have a governor who could levy a jet fuel tax break to give it or take it away from Delta when they're not in session. You want to tell me that they can let these MAGA nuts go run roughshod when he can decide whether or not the Delta Airlines Corporation pays a tax? That is some you know what, and I am being good because I'm in a Senate committee. So let's be clear, our governor is not some pro-voter hero. He is a lapdog for he is a lapdog for Donald Trump. I don't know anybody else who stands up and whose wife can get harassed by a former president and 3 weeks later be holding a fundraiser and letting these folks sow chaos on our system. So A, there is a solution, the governor can have it. B, voters have the power. Voters are motivated and voters are clear in this state. They remember the phone calls. They know what's happening. So our mission is to hold these guys accountable, speak truth to power, which I'm so happy to be doing with y'all, and then get back into our communities and turn out the vote. Because we got to, my conclusion, the only way we beat these guys is we got to beat them at the ballot box, we got to beat them in court, we got to beat them in our organizing, and we have to keep working because they're going to come back to y'all next year in session, peddling whole stacks of lies and ask for a whole bunch more changes, no matter what the outcome is, right? That's what's coming y'all's way. And so I'm very grateful for the leadership in the state Senate. So thank you. Thank you.
We truly thank you. And many of the people who requested this meeting today of our committee wanted to know if they wanted to make these changes, why didn't they come to the legislature as they should? But after, it would not be until January. So we already know the answer.
Well, and Madam Chair, they did come to the legislature.
Not with
They-
this one?
Yeah, they ran through so many changes. We were working
Oh,
with
yes,
you
I
all.
know.
And so it is the most disingenuous. Hypocrisy is just low on the list of their crimes and
Mhm,
errors.
mhm.
The last thing I will say as you all consider this, let us remember that Chris Carr, who is declining to push Brian Kemp to act on their illegal meeting, I think we might have some members here who represent College Park. Let's think for a moment. Black Democrats who run College Park got in a bunch of trouble for not properly holding open meetings.
Oh, that's right.
Do you know that you can go find on 11 Alive covered it, that they sent a nasty letter, the Attorney General sent a nasty letter and opened up a full investigation into the Black Democrats of College Park for not properly holding illegal meetings. Right here in our capital, those folks have not only gone exceeded their authority, they have committed a crime. That open meeting is a misdemeanor that can get fined. And somehow Chris Carr can go after the Democrats of College Park for their illegal open meetings, but not go after our MAGA friends here in the Capitol. So the hypocrisy, and I would encourage the state Senate to look to see how we can hold these folks accountable, because they certainly have the power.
Okay, thank you. Before you leave, we do have one more question. And then after that, when, with all of the other speakers, we have to stay with the 3 minute and 3 more
asking me questions,
comments. So, but we have the next two people after our senator asks a question, are two Zoom people, and one is Milton Kidd, who could not make it this morning, but he's on the Board of Elections that was under that did approve some of he didn't necessarily, but some of them did. Thank you. So go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, this is back to your statement about Attorney General Chris Carr and Brian Kemp, as they're punting back and forth about who has jurisdiction over the board. This is about the formal complaint that was filed, and it was about the legal meeting that happened on July 12th. And could you speak to we know the governor punted the decision to Chris Carr to kind of adjudicate and come up with an answer. Can you speak to his reasoning about why the governor doesn't have to respond because it's not a formal complaint? Can you speak to the formal complaint? What does that mean? Because law backs that it doesn't. What's the formal complaint, number one? In law, we've already had, a whole case about a formal complaint. It just has to be a complaint. But could you speak to that portion?
Well, Senator Merritt, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is if a citizen, a former Board of Elections member, state senator and others, if you read their complaints, these are not on scraps of paper. They are well-reasoned, fully cited, articulate complaints that have been filed. But somehow these are not formal complaints. So what is a formal complaint, Attorney General? What was the formal complaint in College Park that got the full force of your office enforcing the law? We don't know. And currently it looks like, if you read what he said about the formal complaint, that nobody can hold this unelected board accountable. And so now look, a couple things have happened. Number one, Kathy Willard, if she shows, she filed a criminal complaint with the Capitol Police because law enforcement, if somebody steals your car, you call and they have to investigate the crime. Now, we all know sometimes crimes get fully investigated, sometimes not, but they at least have to try. So the Capitol Police, we should be asking them, this is their jurisdiction. What are they going to allow to go on in this house? Last time I heard a knock on the door could get you arrested. Holding an illegal meeting? So we will see. Secondly, there was a writ of mandamus filed. A writ of mandamus is a legal action that demands that a state official do their statutory duty or do not use the discretion they are using in doing their statutory duty, saying that the discretion their office has is inaccurate. So that is now in the court system, we will see. But I think the larger question is, who is going to have oversight? Now, as my SPLC colleague and others have spoken about, there has been litigation filed on some, but not all of these rules, right? And so I think we'll see what the court system does, trying to change the rules 100 days before election on certification and hand count. I think we are in uncharted territory all around. And I think we have a weak governor who clearly seems to be beholden to MAGA forces and Donald Trump, who is not taking action. We have an attorney general shuffling around, at times speaking truth to power, right? He came out and told the state election board, don't do the hand count rule. All the elections and officials in the state said, don't do the hand count rule. A bunch of common sense Republicans said, don't do the hand count rule. If you look at every aspect of what has gone on with the state election board, there is bipartisan opposition. I mean, that has not been highlighted enough. This is not just Democrats like us screaming and hollering. This is bipartisan opposition to everything this board has done, except for this MAGA majority that runs our state. And so I think we're going to see what the courts do. I think average citizens have been flooding the state election board with comment. that we've done a lot with the media to raise this. And I think everybody is clear what's going on, clear as day what the goals are. And so that's where our mission is to turn out the vote, right? Turn out the vote and then elect more good pro-voter Democrats to join your caucus and push back hard as voter suppression bills come your way again, undoubtedly next year. Thank you.
I do thank you very much, and we do look forward to getting the comments that you made. And please know that you're not just talking at the mic. This committee responsibility is to make sure that both sides are heard and that both sides get into a conclusion that we will send to all the senators as well as, of course, the lieutenant governor. And if someone wants to make this formal charges to Kip Carr, then they will be able to do that. Chris Carr, rather. Excuse me, Kip. I've just been knowing you forever. But we know who I'm talking about. So somebody, you can come talk to some of us even, so we can make it official if that needs to be done. Because you've already heard from our chairwoman who is our leader. Unfortunately, on a leave, but she's still here with us, as well as our whip who made the same comments that you made. So thank you, and let's go on to the next person. Oh, he's not, is Milton on now? Would you like to say hello? You're on Zoom.
Yes, ma'am, I'm on the call. 1 second.
And I thank you for being with us, and will you make some comments, please?
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and I appreciate this committee for taking this issue seriously. For myself and for other elections officials, our primary concern with not just the proposed rules in this legislation, and from this rulemaking body, but it is the timing of said rules. Typically, during an elections process, you want to have your policies, procedures, and rules established. I would argue the association, Gabriel is the Association of County Elections Officials. Gabriel is arguing for a 90-day quiet period by which no new election rules will be passed during that 90-day period before an election. I would even argue that a good policy and procedure for elections administration is to have all of the rules for that election season in place prior to a primary election. Having those rules in place prior to a primary election allows us time to work out individually how our elections officers are going to comply with these rules. We in the state of Georgia have 159 counties that have to implement rules uniformly. So you cause chaos when you change the rules literally days before. The last pieces of state election board rules will not legally take effect until October the 11th. Some of those proposed rules that they were proposing at the time actually affect processes and procedures such as absentee balloting. Luckily, that rule failed passage, but you were attempting to change state election board rules covering policies and procedures that would have taken effect days after you're legally required to actually mail ballots. That makes no sense. From a rulemaking perspective, the state election board has indicated that they're going to continue making election rules even in the current election season, that even if a rule is not present on election day, it will govern runoff elections and subsequent processes that have to happen during an election season. And that's ridiculous. That's chaos from an administrative perspective. But that's my statement as the elections director for Douglas County with over a decade of elections experience doing this.
We appreciate that. And also, I know that you make comments on the day that they were trying to pass this. And I wanted you to share with us what you think about the hand ballots,
Okay,
hand counting ballots.
yes, ma'am. The proponents for this proposed rule are stating a couple of things. They're stating that they're not actually asking us to tabulate the ballots, but to simply count the ballots. I would argue that that is semantics for a couple of reasons. Those absentee ballots, not absentee, I'm sorry about that. Those ballots that are cast inside of a polling location have already gone through the scanner. So a digital image of that ballot has already been captured and will be uploaded back to our central tabulators in each of the counties. The counties, as part of their reconciliation process already, when every ballot comes back, the county is required to do what is called batch those ballots into batches of 50 to put into our post-election audit. These processes and procedures happen in elections office on election night and the day after anyway. Having individuals stay inside of a polling location, break the chain of custody of the ballot box to open them up and to physically have 3 individuals try to count polls at a polling location is pure election theater. There is no subjective process or policy that this is actually being used to aid or enhance the elections process. We currently have election rules that counties have worked through over multiple elections now because the current election system was implemented in 2020. We've had the 2020 election, we've had the 2022 gubernatorial election, and we've had the presidential preference primary as well as the general primary this year to establish policies and procedures that we have worked with our poll workers that they're familiar with. And now we are in the 9th hour going to tell you to do something different that is not actually aiding to elections administration. There's no legitimate purpose to have poll workers do this. And I can tell you that I have, and I'm going to lose poll workers if this rule is actually put into place, because it is a burdensome rule on poll workers who are working 16 and 17 hours already, to have them physically counting papers and possibly disseminating elections information before an elections office is actually able to verify results puts all elections offices in a bad place.
My goodness. Wow. I tell you, I'm overwhelmed, so I don't know about my other members. Do we have any direct questions that we like to ask this great panelists? Yes. Number 11. Go ahead.
A quick one. Milton, can you talk to us about the atmosphere that election denialism has created for you and your staff, and the what you're just dealing with on a personal, professional level with some of these folks that come to your meetings, and we've seen some of them down here at the Capitol?
It's not hyperbolic to say this, but this is one of those situations where you almost have to laugh to keep from crying. It bothers me, the political climate that individuals throughout this state have continued to allow the misnomers of the elections process to continue. And by that, I mean individuals that are elected and appointed and are blatantly making false statements about our elections process. There are real people that work in these processes. There are real people that are listening to the conversations of the individuals that degrade the elections process. Individuals that take it upon themselves to do what is called doxing of election workers, including myself, which is sending the police to your home address. They routinely get your work and private phones and emails and send you threatening messages. It's a it's a problem that the state really needs to look at and hold individuals accountable that are blatantly making false statements about the process. I would say we're still arguing as a state and as a nation over the 2020 election. The 2020 election has been the most scrutinized election in U.S. history, with every law enforcement agency, every committee agency on the state level and the federal level looking at exactly how that election and the subsequent elections were conducted. And no smoking gun has been found. But yet, even to this day, the previous meeting I was just looking at was the decision in Fulton County where they're hearing cases about these current rules. But you still have individuals stand up and make accusations about the elections process without any verifiable proof, without any evidence. And those non-evidence-based statements are dangerous when you have a political climate that takes every disagreement to the physical extreme where you're threatening individuals with violence. Our elections process is fundamental to what it means to be American in this country. This is what separates us from other countries, is our understanding of democracy and how it works, and that every U.S. citizen has a God-given right to cast their ballot for who's going to represent them. And when we allow individuals to undermine those processes and procedures, what are we saying? We're saying that we don't value these processes and procedures. But while I have you, I would be remiss if I didn't make this direct plea, since I'm in front of a committee that is concerned about elections integrity. One of the biggest things in this state that has bothered me is the fact that there is no direct funding for elections from a state level to county elections offices to do things like recruit poll workers, deal with facilities, address concerns of voters, and different things like that. I think that if we're taking elections seriously in this state, let's take elections seriously and let's put our money where our mouth is. We know that there are common sense solutions that can actually bring clarity to the elections process. And I know myself and other elections directors across the state want to work with this committee as well as the complete legislature to ensure that everyone that wants to cast a ballot in this state is able to do so in the most safe and secure manner possible. I hope that answers your question. I know it's roundabout, but if I'm in front of you all, I'm gonna throw everything out.
Yes, you answered it. Thank you. But you're right, we need to work together and complete this. At this time, I don't know if any other member of the election board, have they come in? Because you know, Milton, thank you for accepting. Most of them said they'd get back with us, and I don't see them here now. But you came and you gave us the real details, and thank you very much. And
Yes,
we'll be
ma'am.
back with you. If you want to stick around on Zoom and listen to us, please do.
Yes, ma'am. I'll be
We have so
available for
many
any
people who
comments or
signed
questions.
up, and we still have about 5 people who were on the original panel. So let us go next to our representative, Chairman Carl Gilead. Oh. He had to hang up for a minute. He'll be back with us. We have, I'm gonna go up here. Cindy Battles, People's Agenda. Hello.
Good morning, committee. It is still morning, right? I know.
It's still morning, I think, barely.
Thank y'all so much for holding this hearing, for inviting us to speak. Again, my name is Cindy Battles. I am the policy director for the People's Agenda. I am going to try in 3 minutes to talk about how since 2018, both in the Georgia Assembly and the State Election Board, we have seen laws and rules passed that disenfranchise voters, that increase election cost, and what those impacts are on election workers as well. So from HB through, I'm not going through the entire history of Georgia, but we'll talk about since 2018 and what we saw in that election. and how laws and rules have been passed that make it harder for absentee votes and that kind of thing. We've presented reports, even from the Brennan Center, about how those disproportionately impact voters, particularly Black voters, LEP voters, unsheltered homeless voters, as we saw with SB 189. We could talk about that all day long. We hear consistently that that is not the intent of the bill, but even if it's not the intent of the bill, I think we've proven beyond a shadow of the doubt that it is the impact. Since we're on the record for that so much and we only have 3 minutes, I'm going to kind of let that go for now. I do want to talk about the work that we have done around election cost. People's Agenda has spent months talking to election supervisors, getting their budgets from 2018 to the present to show how these unfunded mandates are increasing the election cost. And I believe Senator Estevez has already asked about this, but kind of what that impact is on county budgets. Right? We've got, he mentioned Fulton County. I've got folks who are spending more on municipal elections than they did on the 2018 governor's race. And part of that's a good thing because we got modernized machines and paper ballots, which are really helpful for audits and that kind of thing. But what we have to understand is even if it's a good thing, it is impacting county budgets. Right? I've got smaller counties, and I know this is urban affairs, but I've got smaller counties spending $100,000 more on elections. And we're talking municipal elections, not just presidential or gubernatorial, municipal elections. So what do they do when they have to raise this much money and the state doesn't appropriate funds to cover that? So you see things like the criminalization of poor neighborhoods, fines and fees being increased. The GBPI did a study and it shows something around 79 municipalities in the state of Georgia that use fines and fees to cover the cost of their budgets at a toxic level. And to give you guys kind of like what that looks like, when the Department of Justice investigated Ferguson and found out how they were using fines and fees to fund their budget, we're at that level or above. I've talked to election supervisors who were so worried that they were going to have to buy additional memory cards and the county was going to have to take money away from the EMS service and new ambulances to cover the cost of memory cards. These laws and these rules are not just impacting elections, they are impacting the services that we give counties. And they're increasing the inequity in our economy and poorer communities. Because if you can't afford to pay your car insurance, that doesn't actually make you a criminal, but you're going to be criminalized for that so that counties can pay for their elections. And if we're trying to make elections more safe and more secure, then attacking the infrastructure is the last thing that we want to do, but it's the very thing that we continue doing in this state. Not just on a Georgia Assembly level, but on a state election board level. When you're continuously increasing the cost of elections, but you're not giving them money to do that, you are making our elections more unsafe. Not to mention what you are doing to election supervisors. I've talked to election supervisors who are looking for other jobs because they're not making enough money. They're choosing between groceries and medicine, between their rent and their light bill. These are people with institutional knowledge that we trust to keep our elections going. One of the fundamental rights that we have as citizens to vote, and we're trusting these people, and they don't know how they're going to live from paycheck to paycheck. These are the impacts that every single day, the rules that are being made and the laws that are being passed are having. And if we don't start listening to election supervisors, we're going to lose them. And who's going to replace them? Who is going to take a job where you're constantly harassed, where you're not paid enough, and you're expected to carry the burden of elections in the state of Georgia? I don't know what the solution is to stop this because it feels like it's like the dam has already burst, the train is already derailed, whatever. I appreciated earlier when Isabel reminded voters, we're here, we're standing in the gap. Please go out and vote because that is the number one thing that you can do, and then hold your elected officials accountable, right? But every election supervisor I talk to is overwhelmed. Every board of elections is overwhelmed. We have got to do something where we stop unfunded mandates in the state of Georgia, where we stop passing laws and rules that make elections harder to run because we believe something that is not true. And I'm open to any questions.
Do you have any questions briefly? Hi, Dr. Redd? You have a question? Dr. Michael Redd, number 10, okay.
Oh, 10, you don't.
Oh, no. New engine number 9 then, okay.
How you doing, Cindy?
Well, how are you?
All right, I just want you to expand a little more on how these changes affects the quality of the people you recruit to try and work at the poll.
Okay, so let's take the hand count rule as like one of the best examples, right? The idea that we are going to hand count all of these paper ballots. You have election workers who have worked 14, 15-hour days, and most of them, by the way, are not paid hourly. They're paid per day. There are some of them who are making maybe $110 for that 14-hour day. And then they are going to hand count all of these ballots. Not the votes, because I know people get confused about what a vote and a ballot is, but they're going to hand count these and they're going to have to do it until it matches. They are exhausted. And a lot of times in a lot of the counties, the same people who are working the polls and doing that are then going to go, after they finally manage to reconcile this, they are going to go and they are going to be the people who are counting the votes, right? So we make their day longer, we make their day harder. They're less likely to return to do this job. And not to mention, a lot of these election workers are older, right? The people that we rely on are very often older senior citizens. And I'm not disparaging that. I'm just saying they're tired and we're making it harder for them to do their job, especially when you're doing it for $110 a day.
Yes, I understand. Wow, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we get your comments too? Or can I get them to Diego and I'll share them with the committee? But thank you very much. It was just one more.
Yes.
It was a question that I meant to ask to Mr. Kidd, to Milton Kidd. And that is about, are you having to hire, are they having to hire other people to come in when the polls close and count? And I know this is already an unfunded mandate, but are they gonna have to hire other people here at the 11th hour for the November general election?
Ideally, yes, they'll hire more people. But what happens if you don't have the budget to hire more people?
Right.
Then you're just making the people that you have hired have to do more work. So if they are hiring more people, it's a luxury.
I thank you. I wanted to bring that point out, but I wasn't quite sure, and I do agree with you. But I wanted to hear it from someone who's an expert. Thank you very much for your comments. Next, we have Tori Salas, Cobb County Chair of the Board of Education. Is it right? Board of Election, Chair of Election. See, I'm just reading what they printed on here. And now that I see you, I already know who you are. Thank you very much for coming. And please share with us some comments about the election rules that are having to be implemented here at the 11th hour.
Absolutely. And first and foremost, my name is Tori Silas. I am the chair of the Cobb County Board of Elections. It's a position that I've been in since July the 21st. I'll also apologize for my tardiness. I don't know as to whether you all tuned into our meeting last evening, but our county authorized, our elections board authorized litigation. And so I have been in other meetings, so I do understand the seriousness and the importance of this meeting. But had another matter I had to attend to. So with that, I'll continue. As I shared, I have been in this position since July of 2021. To the extent that you are not familiar with the composition of the Cobb County Elections Board, we are a 5-person board. 2 of our members are appointed by the county parties. 1 member is appointed by the chair of the Board of Commissioners, and two of us, including myself, are appointed by our legislative delegation. So again, I'm one of those appointees. And I was appointed and began my service in July of 2021. I note that for you to underscore the fact that I, from this position, did not have to deal with chaos, the immediate chaos that ensued after the 2020 presidential election. However, I have been navigating the continued chaos as brought about by certain rules that are being promulgated and laws, SB 202, HB 189, and now these SEB rules. On September the 16th, the Board of Elections held a special called meeting, and one of the matters that we undertook was to adopt a resolution. It was a resolution that was passed unanimously. We provided a copy of that resolution to the members of the State Election Board. And under that resolution, we joined with Gavrio and other individuals that had made their voices known that we believe that this last minute effort with respect to the adoption of these SEB rules is wholly unnecessary. It is really a solution looking for a problem, because the problems that they are suggesting exist do not exist. And I say that from the perspective of working in an elections office very closely with our elections director and our election staff. I don't know what has been shared, and I don't want to be repetitive. I'm happy to go through my prepared statements when I thought that I would be here at 10 a.m., or I'm happy to answer questions. But I will address one of the questions that I heard posed with respect to adding additional election workers or hiring additional election workers specifically to come in the evening. Admittedly, you can just call us innovative, if you will, and creative. Our elections director was considering, and we were planning to pilot a program where we would provide for or bring on closers and openers. It had nothing to do with the rules. It's just an idea that she thought about, because the election day as provided, as you all have described, is extremely long. You start that day at 5 a.m., depending upon whether that poll opens up on time. You very well may leave at 7:30, 8 o'clock. Depending upon if there are issues, you very well may leave later than that. That's an extremely long day.
Yes.
And not only is it a toll on the individual poll workers, it also prevents individuals that don't have the flexibility in their schedule, that would like to participate in this process, that would like to be a poll worker. It prevents, and perhaps their job doesn't allow them that flexibility to be off that entire day. It would provide them the opportunity. But what was a pilot program, what was supposed to be a pilot program, I think that's like it's an indication of how early our poll workers are going to have to get up at the crack of dawn.
I agree.
To be there. That was well played.
That was right on time.
It really was.
But I like the pilot program that you're talking about, and I do think that we do need to have your Cobb County people to introduce it on this, maybe this next legislative session. But I wanted to point out to you that if you already know that you need help because it's a long process, now we're going to make it even longer by having to hand count votes and also implement new rules.
Right. And to that point, Madam Senator, it is a situation where we are proposing to implement rules, or obviously at this point, I believe we're required to, there's a question there. But if we are required to implement these rules, in Cobb County, we are hiring upward of 1,800 poll workers. As the previous speaker made mention of, some of them are not compensated hourly. It is a per diem that they are provided. We have already started training. Our training started in early September. So now we're in a situation where we have area supervisors, poll managers, assistant poll managers, and potentially poll clerks that need to be retrained. Well, that training needs to be developed. So then we are also imposing upon our election staff, the individuals that are responsible for training, for them to go back in and modify and supplement the training materials that have already been created, as well as provided to individuals that have already gone through training.
My goodness. Okay, one quick question, because we have about 20 people
Right.
on the list.
What type of an impact would something like that have not only on your budget, but perhaps more smaller rural budget?
Understood. Well, it's been widely publicized, the fact that our elections director went back in August to request a supplemental budget. So this would require a supplement to the supplemental budget as it relates to needing additional funds for either poll workers or additional material, additional equipment. We've got a very large budget. You're obviously one of our senators, Dr. Rett, and you've been at this much longer than I have. I can only imagine what the smaller counties are going through with respect to their ability to comply and the funds that are necessary. These unfunded mandates are going to put a strain. If it's going to put a strain on what the third largest or populous county with respect to the number of registered voters, I can only imagine what it's going to do to the smaller counties.
Also, want to thank you for your work. We really appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Wright.
We do thank you very much. And we would like to invite you to give us something in writing if you would like.
Yes,
If
I'm
not,
happy
we
to.
did.
No, I'm happy to provide it to you in writing.
Especially the presentation that you were going to make at 10 that we didn't get a chance to hear.
Absolutely. I'll provide it to you.
Thank you very much. Next person that we have is Representative Park Cannon, who is our House Caucus Secretary. And then, of course, did Carl Gilead get back on the line? Okay, thank you. Thank you for being
Madam
here.
Chair. Yes, thank you, members. I come to you as your co-part in this House Senate work to make sure that elections run fairly and freely in Georgia. I also have the honor of serving as the House Chair opposite the Senator Sonia Halpern for the Fulton County delegation. And in the legislative agenda that Fulton County, the state's largest county, runs the largest elections this year, they specifically requested adjustments in the election day equipment allocation formula, recognizing that analysis of current data and voting trends demonstrate that more than half of Fulton County voters choose to participate in early voting. I, for one, love early voting. I enjoy it because it provides me, as someone who works, a flexible schedule to figure out when and where I can vote. And I am excited that as a young person, I get to do that. But I'm deeply concerned that as we move into this early voting period in 15 days, with new rules trying to come in, that it will be difficult for Fulton County to accurately process those ballots and to serve its constituents. So I'm here today just to remind you of that ask that Fulton County made on their legislative agenda this session.
Thank you. We thank you very much. And are there any questions? Thank you very much, Representative Cannon. And we appreciate what you brought to us today. We knew, some of these things, we were in the sessions and heard them, but they have escaped us. So refreshing us on those points is even better.
And I'll resend you that document.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you very much. The next person is Chris Bruce, ACLU. Thank you very much. I appreciate your patience too, because we are going to get through this list if we can.
Madam Chair, of course, Chris Bruce, ACLU of Georgia. Thank you for having me. Thank you for holding this meeting, as well as all of these distinguished elected officials, because I know you're not just elected officials, you're advocates for your community. So I'll tell you what, in light of the time limit, I'll forego my statements. I'll send it to you in a record. We can run through this PowerPoint real fast and be on the way.
Thank you.
I'll start off with this statement though, because we also have to think about the people who have been impacted by the hurricane. Our thoughts and prayers are with them. And it's not just thoughts and prayers. We're going to follow up with action. we are going to be sending supplies to Senator Jones' community, water, flashlights, those type of things, because we expect with thoughts and prayers that you actually do something about it. Like when you have a shooting at a school, you can't just have thoughts and prayers.
Absolutely.
You
Thank
actually have to
you.
do something about
You're
it.
correct.
Right. So
Thank you.
we're gonna run through this real fast.
How long is it?
You know what? It's about to be 30 seconds. Okay. We're about to
No,
run into
no,
this.
we want to hear it. Yes. go
Right.
ahead.
And I'll go with this. Voter suppression in the state of Georgia is not new. Ever since Black people had the right to vote, it's always been trying to get taken away. So we're not just talking about voter IDs laws. We're not just talking about SB 202, but this recent phenomenon of voter ID, of voting laws have been just completely out of whack without any type of policy pros, except linking it to partisan wins and partisan losses. So you cannot ignore that SB 202, which was passed in 2021 after the pivotal election in the state of Georgia. So again, this is what we have to think about from history with the Compromise of 1877. You can win on the federal level, but if you're not winning on the state level, you're not winning because more people get impacted by the results. Let's go to the next slide. Well, my bad. Let's go to the previous slide. There we go. Well, this year alone, SB 189 and HB 1207, further dealing with voter challenges and making sure that people who are unhoused, these are people that, again, they already have problems to think about, not just about voting, but in their communities, people that are looking for security, food, anything else, education, anything else that you can actually picture of. And yet you're still targeting individuals who already have problems and making their lives even harder. That is not the point of this state legislature, at least it should be. Let's go to the next slide. So all of these challenges that have happened, all of these problems that are coming up, all it's doing is spreading mistrust and voter apathy. There are people who no longer want to vote because they don't want to deal with the politics within it. Remember when voting used to be boring? You remember that when there was like, oh, just go out and vote. Hey, I'm gonna cast my ballot. There was like no problems with it. And now we're at a point in our society where everyone's like, oh my God, what's next? And the state election board, a body that people generally did not know about before 2020, is now at the forefront on national and international news. Let's go to the next slide. The certification rules, not only have other people before me talked about it, we're also gonna run through this, but reasonable inquiry, delaying certifications, trying to put our democracy at risk. Again, questioning things that have been put in place way before us, have worked perfectly fine in a boring manner. And now we're in a situation where we don't even know what's going to happen after November 5th. We don't know what's going to happen after November 12th. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I already bought a one-way ticket out of Georgia. It leaves November 13th. I'll let you know if I'm coming back.
Oh, no.
Okay? We're going to see. Let's go to the next slide.
Where you going?
See, I'm not
Might
even
wanna
releasing that.
give us
Nope,
another
not on the record. So again, we have thoughts and prayers over these issues, but we also have litigation. That's what the ACLU is known for. Filing an amicus brief for the Abu Rahman case. Vasu's doing a great job representing so many people as the Board of Elections chair, the Board of Elections in DeKalb County.
Yeah.
So this is what we're known for, suing. And if we can go to the next slide. Hand counting. In fact, let's skip this slide too, because this slide talks about possibly another lawsuit, but we don't have it. What I can say for this body though is, what do election workers need? And you heard from Director Milton and others. That's what we want to focus on. Increased support for election officials and better protections for election officials. Universal student ID. It's still a situation right now where a Georgia State student can vote with their ID card, but a Morehouse student can't. A Spelman student cannot. Why not? That is like, we are outliers in the entire South, and really this nation, that deals with these type of rules. These simple type of fixes can increase voter participation. Stricter guidelines to voter challenges. You've heard it from so many people before. These voter challenges are a waste of taxpayer dollars, especially going through it. And I don't know what y'all gonna do with the state elections board. Let's just revamp the whole thing because this isn't working out. Let's go to the next slide. Is there a next slide? Yep, there's not one. There's not one. So I'll say this again, with thoughts and prayers, we don't just follow up with thoughts and prayers. We follow up with lawsuits. I don't know if y'all heard this one bill called HB 481, the abortion ban that was passed in Georgia. Did y'all see that? That was also struck down yesterday. That's right. That was an ACLU case. We're still in litigation over SB 202. And you know what? We're still in litigation. You remember the redistricting bill that passed. ACLU sued over that and won. And they redrew the lines again. Well, we're tired of suing this state. Right? And we're not tired of winning, but we're tired of suing the state. We want to get back to the business of the people. And that's what we do. So with that, I'll yield with any questions.
Thank you very much. We do have two questions.
Two questions.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Chris, for coming in. I wanted to go back a little bit to the certifying until reasonable inquiry. What is a reasonable inquiry? Who will determine what is a reasonable inquiry? And then two, I will still reiterate, the board is passing an illegal rule. And so could you speak to all of that, please?
But it's, you know better than I do, because you're a part of this body. You're a legislative body that makes laws. The state election board is trying to become a legislative body. It's superseding their authority that was given by the legislature. And most legislators do know and agree with that. Your governor agrees with that. Your attorney general agrees with that. But there's been no work to actually put guardrails on these individuals at all. So reasonable inquiry, I have a reasonable inquiry of what a reasonable inquiry is. So, Senator, I think you bring up a great point. And until a state election board member can actually come in front of this body and actually put forth a reasonable explanation to why they're actually pushing forth these rules, backed up by facts and real policies that have been in place, then hey, you're still going to get more lawsuits, which diverts funds and attention again towards issues that are dealing with it. We're talking about a state that deals with Black maternal mortality in the worst in the nation. We should be having hearings about that, not about this. Again, let's make voting boring again. Okay, we can run with that. Go ahead, Senator.
Yeah, and just back to kind of the governor's responsibility here. We already have talked about how he could stop all of these actions from the state election board because they are illegal. And it is up to this body and this legislature, as we know, to make laws. That's what we do. And the governor signs those laws. But what we're dealing here with, we have laws on the book, but the governor is refusing to enact those laws. So why, I guess my question is, and my question maybe to you or Governor Kemp, why are we even here making laws if we're not going to follow those laws and actually, you know
what? Let me
enforce those laws?
I'm gonna text BK right now and see.
I mean, I
I'll
do
let
have a
you.
question. We've made, we have clear law that gives guidelines for the state election board, and we have, but if we're not going to enforce them, why are we even here?
Why are we? And let's go and put in perspective what's happening, because we know what happened in 2020, where it said the governor and the secretary of state stood up. They did their job. Actually, they didn't commit a crime. So thank you for not committing another crime that was going forth, right? So it's not oh Lord, everything's great. No, you didn't commit a crime, guy. So do your job. That is all the people who voted for you and who did not vote for you. That's what you swore to do, is represent the people of Georgia and uphold the law. We're asking for the same, because we have seen this governor remove people from office before.
Absolutely.
Remove constitutional officers before.
Yes.
And yet you can't remove from a state election board of people that you appointed, and you have inquiries into that. We should do a reasonable inquiry into why. Actually, people have done a reasonable inquiry into why this isn't happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There are two other questions, and we start. I'm gonna yield to our leader first and then you. Okay.
I have more of a concern. Did I speak ahead? I have a more of a concern that if an election board, say DeKalb County decides, we're not going to do these rules, we're not gonna follow these rules, what then? If they decide that we're going to follow what we've been doing for all these years that worked,
Mm-hmm. That works.
these rules don't work.
Mm-hmm.
So why should we do them? What happens to our system? What happens to the board? Does
Mhm.
anything happen to the board?
That is a great question, Lita. I hope it does not come to a lawsuit to figure that out. But we wouldn't even be in this position, as you're pointing out, if these state election board rules, which are unconstitutional, were not in the position in the first place. So I want to thank you for your leadership down here at the Capitol. You're going to be sorely missed.
Chris?
But you know what? You can always come back. There's plenty of work to be done, Leader Butler. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and go ahead, Senator Lucas.
The governor said the Board of Elections wrong. The Attorney General said that you can't do it. The governor has not held a hearing on those board members. And the Attorney General has not filed an injunction against what they did. Is ACLU gonna pick up?
I know where
the
this is
stick?
going. I know where this is going. Look, again, all the lawsuits that the ACLU has done, currently doing right now, and will be doing in the future. I mean, it gets to a point, we only have a certain amount of resources, which we thank our members for being card-carrying members of the ACLU. This is why I plug, go to acluga.org if you would like to give any type of donation or anything else, because the work does not stop. Okay, so ACLU will do what it's supposed to do, and that is uphold the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, the Georgia Constitution, and the laws that you pass, the legal laws that you pass. And anything that we do find that is unconstitutional, we will step in the right type place and right time.
Last statement. Elections have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And what we have to realize in this state, we got 34 indicted, soon to be felon if they ever take him to court. But it's almost like he's Jim Jones. He's taking all these folks and everybody drinking the Kool-Aid, even in the Georgia legislature.
Mm.
And the Georgia legislature has become a toxic atmosphere since Donald Trump went on and talked about election denial and fraud in Georgia's election.
Wow.
And had not Secretary Brad Raffensperger recorded the conversation, Trump would have lied on him too.
Mm.
And Raffensperger has been removed as part of the Board of Elections because he provided the soundbite that asked, find me 11,000 votes. And he's been penalized. And not only that, the state legislature has changed those things and rules to take away power from the Secretary of State because he provided the soundbite for the 11,000 votes.
Mm-hmm. I'll go with everything that you're speaking of and the history of how democracies die, right? Because democracies put up safeguards, checkpoints between the different bodies of government. And if you do not access that, if there are people who are purposefully thwarting things, we know from history of other dictators that have taken charge of countries, then we're in a sad position. Again, over a decade ago, we weren't having these type of questions in our election process. People just wanted to go out and voice their vote by way of voting. We want to get back to that. And it doesn't matter your political affiliation when it comes to that. And I think most people want to go back to a sound time when we had clear elections going into it. Don't get my statements wrong, though. There's always been a problem with Black and brown people voting in this country. So it's not that we can just go back. We need to remedy these problems so we don't have to do it again. I always say my job is to put myself out of the job. And that is putting forth civil liberties and civil rights warriors in the legislature so that these laws do not get passed. Voter suppression laws do not get passed. And we actually do represent the people. So thank you for your comments, Senator.
Thank you very much. We have several legislators that have been coming in and out. And if you're still here, you want to stand and just be recognized for a minute, because I want people to know, I see, come on, stand, former legislators, current, and I see our new senator back there too. Yeah, and Deshaun Dance. We have, Sheila, you're not gonna stand up? Sheila Jones. Representative Jones and Representative Lester Jackson, Senator Lester Jackson. Who else? I saw Bodie. Representative Bodie, are you still here? He's gone now.
Yes.
Representative Billy Mitchell has been sitting back there for hours. I know we've been here for a while. If you take a break, I hope you're coming back in, because we're going to actually, I'm going to actually stay, but I won't require my,
Excuse, Madam Chair.
no.
Hey,
I didn't
I
excuse
serve at
you
your pleasure.
For one reason, because I want you to know that we're all here. We all heard what you had to say. And so we're gonna call you on some of it, so that we do need some support when the report comes in. If we need legislation, we don't want necessarily, we want to work with our legislative council. But of course, we want to work with you, because this is bipartisan and this committee is as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll guarantee you a local Black man would do whatever he can do.
Okay. And now you may be dismissed.
Thank you,
as I
Madam
used to
Chair.
tell the kids in school. Thank you. Thank you. We have so many people here. Let's see. Which one? Before the, I know that Mr. Leo Smith needs to leave, but I have to call on, is this Baoki Vu? Where is Baoki Vu? All right. Mr. Vu, do you want, you're one of the board members, correct?
Former, yes.
Former. Okay.
And you can call me
Eh.
Balky, you can call me Bucky.
Bucky, okay.
Actually it's Balky, but I had a classmate in Australia when I was growing up, and he called me Brown Cow for 2 years. Until one day he says, "Why do people call you Balky?" And I said, "Well, that's actually my name."
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. I want to give a special shout out to obviously Senator Butler's office and her team for soliciting my perspective
Mhm.
on this matter of election security and infrastructure, because of my prior role, actually as a Republican appointed member of the DeKalb County Board of Elections over the course of 12 years. First of all, I do have some prepared remarks, and I've had a chance to actually listen to the very, distraught remarks that, but realistic remarks that many of the speakers have had a chance to. I might repeat some of their words exactly, so I hope they'll forgive me if they think that I'm plagiarizing their remarks.
No.
First of all, let me start by saying that under normal circumstances, we'd probably be on different sides of a policy issue, and this gathering might serve as a forum for debate on the issues. I first grew up drawn to Ronald Reagan's message of optimism and the Republican pillars of freedom, opportunity, free trade, and anti-communism. My ties to the Republican Party stretch back to the days as an undergrad at Georgia Tech, through my service on the Bush Presidential Commission, as well as state boards for Republican governors here. And it actually culminated in a very brief tenure as a real Republican presidential elector in 2016. I know that we certainly have our political biases, but we would certainly also appreciate the diversity of thought and the necessity of civil discourse and bipartisanship, the same way that Ronald Reagan showed to Tip O'Neill or Barack Obama towards Paul Ryan. Unfortunately, this is no ordinary moment, for we each might have our own opinions and biases. There is a fundamental difference between biases and lies, truth and fiction. I first, after the 2020 presidential election results and the subsequent January 6th insurrection, I began to voice my opposition to the proposed Elections Integrity Bill of 2021. Why, you may all ask, and that was because I knew the legislation was premised on the big lie that the former president's defeat at the polls had been rigged, that machines had been manipulated, and that thousands of non-citizens and dead people had cast votes. These were all lies propagated by a defeated president who could not bear losing. I knew better, as I had served for, like I mentioned, over a decade on the county's Board of Elections. During my tenure, under the administration of Secretary of State Karen Handel, to Brian Kemp, to Brad Raffensperger, whom are all Republicans the last time I checked. The policies and procedures have been implemented to ensure safe and secure elections, oftentimes opposed by many of you, the loyal Democratic opposition.
Excuse me, this is Republican and Democrat committees
Yes.
that are here. And so nobody, it's not anything biased
Exactly.
against it, except you say you started out with Reagan and I was the air traffic controller then. So, you know,
I was,
16,000 of us.
well, I was trying to merely show that
Just
I'm
kidding.
coming, yes, I know. So to this day, the election deniers and the insurrectionists have lost lawsuit after lawsuit across the country. And to paraphrase, if you ever see the movie A Few Good Men, Jack Nicholson's character, Colonel Jessup, you know, to paraphrase him, they just could not handle the truth, right? So in 2021, standing up against an immoral and questionable piece of legislation was actually a very easy decision for me. And it also meant that there was no need to contort myself to appease this mega circus, right? I was not willing to be a useful idiot, as well as a tool for voter suppression. Because why? Because voter access and elections integrity to me are really the foundational pillars of a healthy, functioning democracy. This is personal for me because 5 decades ago, my family left South Vietnam before Saigon fell to the communist North Vietnamese forces. And the country has not had a truly fair and free election in 49 years.
Wow.
So, update till today, since the hasty passage of the so-called Elections Integrity Act, is there any wonder as to the true intent of the EIA, right? I perhaps actually was probably a bit more naive in my initial assessment because I actually thought that at worst, it would somehow just lead to some minor proverbial quote unquote unintended consequences. However, the unintended consequences are nowhere near as dangerous as the intended consequences, which is and remains to dismantle the various institutions of trust. One, State Elections Board, for example, and removing the capable individuals of integrity to be replaced by opportunists and sycophants. Second goal was to sow the chaos and confusion, as many of you have mentioned, which then would lead to the third, which is the ultimate aim of suppressing votes. Many of you have talked about the hand count, proposed hand count rules and mass voter challenges. All these are meant to sow chaos and confusion, right? And at the end of the day, you know, and I'm not going to go into more details about my personal life, but I know the SEB, and the SEB has no statutory authority to legislate election laws. But the Republican candidates of this SEB right now have taken upon themselves to do exactly just that in order to rig the election in their nominee's favor. At the same time, they continue to attack the umpires of elections. I'm a sports, I love sports. And, I actually know former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. And, we talk about whether in baseball, basketball, you've got referees and you've got umpires. Well, they're attacking the umpires of our elections. They have systematically intimidated, demoralized, and oftentimes pushed out many of those who were trying to simply do the right thing. This is merely a microcosm of what is happening across our country. Our national security is under constant assault from the propagation of lies and conspiracies emanating from both foreign and domestic rogue actors. These conspiracy and lies have run the gamut from President Obama having born in Kenya, to pedophiles running operations out of a pizza store, to rally crowd sizes, and of course to Haitians eating pets, dogs and cats in Ohio. You just can't make this up. But the threat is real. And I speak from experience, as many members of my parents' generation in the Vietnamese American community here have actually bought into this disinformation and harbor this cult-like worship for a man who dodged the draft and ironically avoided serving in the Vietnam War, right? My middle brother and I, we are both college ROTC scholarship recipients, and when we pledge our allegiance to the Constitution and the rule of law, not to any one man or dictator. And so for me, patriotism means much more than just putting on a cheap red cap, right? Doesn't mean a thing. Sadly, the political party that I was first drawn to 35 years ago under Reagan, Bush, Kemp, and in this case, it's Jack Kemp, and Mitt Romney is no longer a party of ideas, but a cult of grifters and fear-mongering. Truth is a bitter pill for us to swallow, but I don't believe we can quit the fight for American democracy. That's why even the Democratic Party's arch nemesis, former Vice President Dick Cheney, along with so many other Republicans, have stood up to endorse Vice President Harris because they simply believe that we have to put country over cult. I want to close by asking for your continued support for the people who carry out the elections, because to me, they're the true heroes, right? It's the poll volunteers I, had experience, seeing, every year, to the poll workers and to the people setting up the machines. None of us is going to miss the crazy rantings of a Rudy Giuliani or a Sidney Powell, but the threat remains from the willing sycophants who are ready to join the circus for their spotlight and their moment for a social media hit or to sell gold coins. I want to end my remarks here by leaving you with this thought. I was inspired by people like Pat Tillman, who quit the Arizona Cardinals and signed up to fight in Afghanistan, and then also Captain Humayun Khan, who threw himself at a terrorist bomb truck. They all sacrificed their lives in freedom, in defense of freedom. They're not suckers and losers, as someone who lost an election has been known to refer to those who laid down their lives. And I do believe that if those heroes were willing to die fighting for our freedom, then I believe we should all be willing to live fighting for freedom. So want to thank you. I'll be able to entertain any questions, but certainly appreciate the chance to come and kind of share my frustrations with many of you.
I thank you. I appreciate it. Do we have any questions? Okay. They're saying it's good frustration. Thank you. It is one comment, please. Representative Nikki.
Thank you for coming in today. You might be the lone Republican in this room, but I also want to thank you for your commitment to democracy and not to what we're seeing is wrong, and you see that is wrong. Thank you for your democracy over party, and I appreciate you coming in today.
Sure. Thank you.
So do I. Thank you so much. The next person is going to be, Mr. Leo Smith, and as he comes, is he still here? As he comes up, let me ask, if we have Dr. Janice Johnston. Is she here? She's a board member. Rick Jeffries, who's also a board member. And Janelle Keene, who is the one that made the proposal for why we're here today in the first place. She's a board member. None of them here? Can we ask our State Patrol if they're also asked in the hallway? But because they're on the list, and I will, if they come in later, we'll address them, but they were on the special panel. We're about to get to the other list as soon as you finish, sir. He's saying they're not here. So thank you. We'll proceed now with you, Mr. Smith. Thank you for coming, and introduce yourself and let us know what you represent.
Senators, thanks for being here. I represent the values of a young boy who joined the Boy Scouts, who was part of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, part of the family called Human Being, and part of the citizenship called Americans. My name is Leo Smith, and I am formerly a Georgia House District Chair with the Georgia GOP in Cobb County, formerly a state committee with the House in the district, and a state committeeman from District 13. Served also as an advisor to several campaigns, helping to win elections for people who I thought were conserving what was good, what was true, and what was beautiful, a democratic republic. And I have been, like Balki Vu, often on the other end of the policy discussion on many issues that you address and that activists in this room address. And in that fight, I would call those fights that we had towards an election to represent the interests of the citizens of Georgia. I would call those fights good fights. A good fight is the kind of fight that you, if it got too crazy, you could break it up with water. Throw water on it, maybe they'll stop and listen and reason better. A bad fight is a fight that ends in fire. Destruction. And as our Capitol Dome stands under repair as we sit here in this meeting, I am concerned that we have a democracy in Georgia that is in disrepair, and I'm concerned about whether or not we're going to construct scaffolding to repair it. And that's why I've joined with the same spirit that on this day he celebrates his birthday, President Jimmy Carter had about, are we going to end up in another civil war? And because of that, I was reached out to by the Carter Center because of some of my work across partisanship, even though I've worked mostly with Republicans as a Georgia GOP executive, working with Republicans to win, and even winning with Nathan Deal against another Carter, Jason Carter, in 2014. But those wins were not wins that we had to break up with water or fire. The gentleman had a contest. We adjudicated the contest on platform, and we adjudicated the contest in the ballot box.
Yes.
And after it was done, Jason conceded in a magnanimous, gentlemanly way, and we went on to run the government for the people. That's a good fight. That's a fight that I can feel good about being a Republican and put a red tie on today, sometimes symbolic, but I've had a hard time wearing this tie since 2016. I wore it on the night that Trump won his elections. And on the next day, and I'm speaking here very clearly because I know though I don't see any Republicans on your committee, I know they're listening. And as a former GOP operative, I want to say that I have not been able to wear this tie proudly. Because I like winning fights that after the fight is done. I like winning contests that after the contest is done, I can stand proudly and feel like I won by the dint of my own effort. In a contest that had clear rules, not created just before the game begins by one side and without interaction with the other side on the rules, not created so that I can get a first down without even getting a yard. You can't hold your heads high, fellow conservatives, fellow Republicans, when you win a game by cheating. So that's why I'm here. And I want to finish real quickly with these remarks because I want to be on the record. Elections are the heartbeat of our democracy. There are moments where every voice and every vote has the power to shape our collective future. That's the essence of the beauty of how God created nature, so that all these elements are working together to make a beautiful ecosystem for us. And so I pray as we head towards November, post this storm called Helene, that you, the committee members, and you, the activists, will make sure that every voting precinct has been surveyed and restored as needed before this next storm, because this next storm is in November. So I wanted to make sure that we know and that you've heard that I, as a conservative, once a Republican, and I want to say a Republican in purgatory, so to speak, right now, that we know how to win fairly. We know how to be transparent. We know how to do it honorably. I want other Republicans to hear me, a Republican, say that, look, when I engage with people like Balki Vu, or even Janelle Jones, now King, as my mentee, when I engaged those people to bring them to the conservative policymaking table in Georgia, it was for a fair process, a process that would make it all better for all of us in Georgia. So a win without cheating is not just a victory, it's a triumph of integrity. A win is when every door is knocked, every hand shook, passionate conversations that matter are delivered from one place to the other, from the kitchen table to the State House. It reflects the will of the people and earned on the merits. That's how we must win, Republicans. It means that our belief in integrity and morality matters enough that we will put it on the platform. Cheating in elections is just shortcuts. I worked with Brad Raffensperger and the Secretary of State. In 2013, I met with then Secretary of State Brian Kemp, and I said, look, we need not have people become emotionally manipulated because of grifters, because of political operatives just seeking a dollar, who wants to keep people riled up in emotions. We need to have an ombudsman methodology for engaging people about what's right with our state, what's right with voter education, and we need a voter education operation out of the Secretary of State's office. And so we created Secure the Vote. We went out and educated people on how to use the machines. And believe it or not, we discontinued that program even when I did it with the Secretary of State's office with Brad Raffensperger. Why? Because we have gained more interest in just electioneering than in governance. So I would argue with some statements about whether or not we really have an attack on Black people. No, I think my Republican friends are a little smarter than just making it based on race. What we have is a wimpy way of winning through manipulation and electioneering that would make some people stay home and others come. Because truly, if I, a Black Republican voting Republican, they're not really going to try and stop me from voting if I'm voting Republican. I would say to you, I want to be clear about this so you know what you're up against. That if a bunch of redhead people were all voting 98% Democrat and they wanted to stop Democrats from winning, they would figure out a way to keep redhead people from voting. I want you to be clear on that because you have to know what you need to do. This isn't a matter of race so much as a matter of people wanting to keep power, even if they have to cheat for it. Now, that's a cheap way of power, and that power won't last. We know it won't last because people like Balki Vu, like me, we came here to win with good conscience. And so I want to leave it with you today that there are more of us. There are more of us, and they aren't all just brown skin like Balky and I. But Balky and I can't, and I can speak for him because I've spoken with him, that we didn't come to this party for any type of mythology or protection of power of those who've had it over the decades. And we believe in them more than they believe in themselves. We believe you can win with good conservative engagement with a competition of ideas. I am here to speak hope in their hearts, that they not be filled with madness. So my governor, my brother in the Secretary of State's office, both whom I have helped win, I will not win with you on this stuff. We have to win fairly. And with that, I rest.
Thank you very much. Yes, we can clap for that.
And I'm sorry, I guess I should give you the privilege. If you have any questions, I'd be happy
Are
to
there any
answer.
questions? Any comments? No, well, thank you very much. If you want to give us your written statement, we'll be happy to take
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We called Shannon Ferguson earlier. Oh, no, I don't think you were there. Yeah. Before I left, you're on.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
I will move quickly.
Yeah, I thank you for coming and accepting our invitation.
It's my pleasure, my pleasure. Chairwoman James and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Shannon Ferguson. I'm a longtime state and local public servant. I am the current Senior Policy Analyst and Strategic Communications Director for Georgia First, a cross-partisan nonprofit whose mission includes ensuring election access and security for all eligible Georgia voters. We put people over politics in everything that we do. Georgia First was founded by Natalie Crawford, a former two-term Habersham County Commission Chair. By design, the Georgia First Board of Directors is intentionally comprised of equal Republicans and Democrats, along with one staunch independent, to hold us accountable to the middle. I come before you today because Georgia First firmly believes that good governance is not a partisan issue. The recent unlawful conspiracy-fueled actions by the Georgia State Election Board threaten to create chaos for Georgia's hardworking local election boards and their staff in both urban areas and in Georgia's more rural counties. In fact, as Mr. Kidd mentioned, Gavrio local election officials from across the state have spoken out multiple times in recent weeks, expressing concerns regarding the board's last-minute rules and requesting the board suspend any further rulemaking leading up to the 2024 election. As if the public outcry by the local election experts wasn't sufficient for the board to suspend additional last-minute rulemaking, the extreme right voting bloc of the board moved forward with even more rules during their most recent September 20th board meeting. And in doing so, the board blatantly ignored the written guidance provided by their legal counsel, the Georgia Attorney General's office, their sole and only legal counsel under Georgia law. Georgia First believes that the state election board is exceeding its authority under the Georgia Constitution and attempting to legislate through rulemaking. And let's be honest, that's your job, not theirs. Recent board members' comments stating these new rules create consistency and uniformity are ill-informed at best and at worst, represent a reckless approach to their duties and an unlawful intent. To propose any new rules just months before a major election cycle suggests they're either acting in bad faith with partisan motives or demonstrating an ignorance of their role and actual authority. Georgia First is deeply troubled by this pattern of last-minute rulemaking by the board and the openly hyper-partisan behavior of board members Janice Johnson, Rick Jeffries, and Janelle King. The supermajority of the board has demonstrated its flagrant disregard for local officials' expertise and at times a palpable indifference to local government budget impacts. Georgia First believes that these recent actions by the state election board undermine public confidence and create confusion for both voters and election workers. Simply put, they are sowing chaos and putting our election officials across Georgia in untenable positions with their communities. Their legislating through rulemaking cannot be allowed to go unchallenged, and that's why Georgia First decided to file amicus brief in support of both the Democratic-led lawsuit and the Republican-led lawsuit, challenging the recently adopted rules and the legal authority of the board to enact these rules. Election rules must be developed in transparent, nonpartisan manner, allowing for full public participation. Rules promulgated based on conspiracy-fueled theories and hyperpartisan board decisions erode trust in our elections and threaten the principle that every eligible vote should be counted fairly. None of the state election board members have been duly elected by the people. They are appointees with limited authority and have more than 500 pages of Georgia election code to guide them. And when in doubt about their authority, they have an obligation and a responsibility to seek legal guidance from the Attorney General. And furthermore, Georgia First believes they are bound to adhere to that legal guidance. In democratic elections, there will always be winners and losers, and accepting the outcome is a key part of the electoral process. Candidates who lose are expected to acknowledge defeat with grace, as it upholds the integrity of our system. If there are concerns about the results, legal processes for challenges, recounts already exist to ensure fairness, accuracy, and transparency. These measures, however, must be pursued through the well-established legal channels that maintain public trust and the stability of the democratic process. In closing, while state election board members may be appointed by and affiliated with a political party, their legal and moral obligation is to serve all Georgia voters, not just those who align with their party affiliation or may vote for their preferred candidate. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today.
Don't leave yet.
Okay.
Might be questions, yes. One question.
I recognize. Thank you, Madam
Yeah.
Chair. I have a question, and our leader has, she hit on this earlier. We already know they don't have legal authority to do any of the recent rules. So what if I just tell my county, well, ignore them? The law is on your side, and we're gonna follow the election rules that are on the books now and the election code that is on the books now. We are just shy of so many days of our election. So what is stopping us or anyone from all the counties to say, forget what this illegal board, first of all, they had an illegal meeting, on July 12th, illegal. As we said, they have not even been punished for, so yeah, what legally, if I just tell Gwinnett County, forget them. Forget what, like you tell me the legality of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the issue. It's the legality of it. And I'm not an attorney, and I wouldn't recommend or offer legal advice to any county or any election official. But what I can say is that we believe that the courts have a number of matters before them related to the state election board. And we do trust the courts to uphold the law, and that is what we are counting on. And so it is up to those individual counties who are administering our elections with guidance from their legal counsel to make those decisions about following laws on the books and rules. So I couldn't even begin to speak to that, but I do trust the courts. Court is underway right now over at Fulton County Superior Court for the first court case with the DNC. So we trust that the courts will uphold the law, and that's what we're counting on.
Right, because the governor he's abdicating right now from enforcing any repercussions for the board. The Attorney General seems to be punting as well, so we can't rely on them to enforce the laws regarding these rules that the board has made. So I'm sitting here like, well, who is in charge? Then are we just leaving it up to our counties? But thank you for
having me.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Can you give us your presentation as well? Thank you. Okay. Is someone who was invited sitting there that I may have missed? I know that NAACP is next, and that's you, Kip Carr. And we have this long list that I still want to call. We have, is Blake Osborne still on the line? too? Dr. Lowry's grandson, who, is reading the letter from the SCLC president. Is he still on the line? Okay, you'll be after our NAACP speaker, and then we'll have to go to the list only. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carr. Thank you for being here, and you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair,
Mhm.
Leader Butler, Senators. My name is Kip Carr. And as I introduced you previously during the invocation, if you were paying attention, I am the first Vice President of the Georgia NAACP. I am here in place of the President, Gerald Griggs. And let me just say that we deeply appreciate you, Senator James, and the Urban Affairs Committee for leading this discussion with regard to everything that is happening with the State Board of Elections. And we're very, very concerned about that. Let me just give you a little bit about my background, and I can do it in 3 minutes. I have been involved in civic participation since 1990. Now, I'm not good at math, but I do believe that that's 34 years. You're looking at someone who was a poll worker in 3 states before the age of 50, West Virginia, Kentucky, and here in Georgia. I was the first African-American poll manager in Sylvan Hills in the city of Atlanta in 2003 when they switched to the Diebold touchscreen system. So I think I know a little bit about this process. And I am very concerned about what is going on with the State Board of Elections. And what every speaker has said today and what we're experiencing is absolutely unprecedented. Now, I am below the age of 60. And my point is, for all of my lifetime, this nation has been guided by the Voting Rights Act. I remember when I was in kindergarten, 1st grade, my mother would take us to the polling place, and in those days you had the booth and the curtain, and I was allowed to go in the curtain. You remember that, Madam Chair?
I do.
And the poll manager said to me, one of these days, you will be old enough to do this. And at that time, I was about this high. I never thought I would make it, but I made it. And I have been a super voter. I have never missed an opportunity to vote since I first became a registered voter 39 years ago, I believe. Well, don't let this baby face fool you. I don't look like what I've been through. Now, what needs to really be highlighted and underscored, and as we have talked about today, this unchecked power from the State Board of Elections, and what it reminds me of as a history buff of Atlanta history and Georgia history is the poll taxes, the literacy test, county unit rule. For those of you who understand long time Georgia history, it's all a different. We may call it something different, but it reminds me of what we went through. And for those of us who know and have researched the 3 governors controversy back in the 1940s, this situation here with the State Board of Elections kind of reminds me of that. As a result of the Voting Rights Act, here in Georgia and throughout the nation, we've had a plethora, I like saying that word, plethora, of African-American elected leaders because of our ability to be involved in the process. And now it is very concerning to me that this process is being under attack. Now, Madam Chair, members, I closely observed the State Board of Election meetings virtually, the last 3 that they had downstairs. And what I saw with my own eyes was completely unbelievable. And it reminded me of Fannie Lou Hamer, who was part of the Mississippi Freedom Party trying to get voting rights at the 1964 Democratic Convention, when she said, "We don't want one seat because all of us are tired." Now, as it's been stated today, and senators, I've heard you speak to this very eloquently. The State Election Board was specifically told that about the law. And we've heard about making these not just one change, but so many changes that impacts election directors and it impacts poll workers. And what I saw was a board that did not care and decided to proceed with doing what they wanted to do. I think that the concept of having a 90-day quiet rule is something that needs to be discussed. I think there's open conversation about that. And the hand count. Now, I've been a poll manager, and every time I was a poll manager, Representative Jones, I think I was a poll manager in your district. I had an assistant manager, 2 assistant managers that were over the age of 80. 80, not 70, not 65, but 80. Now, who do you think was responsible for taking the machines to the tabulation place? Okay. Now, this was, I don't know, 2006, 2007, but every time I was assigned a manager, they would contact me. They would give me a list of the people that was working in my precinct. And 9 times out of 10, one of those assistant managers would call and say, "Mr. Carr, I just want to tell you that I'm gonna be a good worker, but I'm not gonna be able to do a whole lot." Okay. And as a poll manager, you don't have any control over that at all. All you can do is do the best that you can with what you have. So that's something that needs to be discussed, and I appreciate the fact that it's being highlighted because of all of the new procedures that poll workers are going to have to endure during this election session. I cannot believe that it's 2024, almost 2025, but we're continuing to talk about the 2020 election. Now, Senator James, senators, members of the public, our children who are in elementary school, when they go to college, probably in sometime in 2030s, what do you think they're going to learn about? They're going to learn extensively about the election of 2020. And Absolutely, Leader Butler, you're absolutely right. Every single lie. Now, and we compare what happened in 2020 with everything that we went through in the 60s. Every single thing that we went through in the 60s. We thought that all of our fights were pretty much over, but it is not. So I have been given time. I want to thank the committee for offering the NAACP, who have chapters branches all across Georgia, from the mountains to the coast. And I believe every member of the Senate has active NAACP units in your districts. And I yield the floor, and I thank you for this opportunity, and I open it for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Kip. Do we have any questions? Have questions? No? No.
Okay.
Let me just thank you for all of the work that you've done all over the state for so long. And you're still there and energetic and jumping, staying here all day. And I know how busy you are. So I thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you so
You're
much.
Our next speaker is Blake Osborne. And were you going to speak also? You were going to read the same thing? Okay. Okay, so thank you for coming and in person and being here with us. And Mr. Osborne is the grandson of Dr. Joseph Lowry. Of course, Mr. SCLC, who's in heaven right now and probably sitting here watching us and making sure that we take care, at least educate everyone on this and hopefully change some things. Urban League will be next, but please go ahead, Mr. Osborne. Mr. Osborne.
Thank you. I hope I can be heard. I regret that I couldn't be there in person today, but I'm so grateful to be here on behalf of the Lowry Institute and the Lowry family. I do have two brief remarks. One is from the Lowry Institute and one is a letter from SCLC, which I will read. But good morning, Senator James and the members of the Georgia Senate Urban Affairs Committee. On behalf of the Joseph and Evelyn Lowry Institute, our staff, leadership, board of directors, I'm honored to be here today to speak on such an important issue and to bring light to a critical topic. As our namesake, my grandfather, Dr. Joseph Lowry, would have said, and once said very poignantly, everything has changed and nothing has changed. And that's the climate we find ourselves in right now, dealing with this issue and the creation of this new form of voter suppression, which is afflicting us and blocking our access. As you so astutely said, Senator James, I know for a fact my grandfather and grandmother are listening in on these proceedings. And if he was here right now, he'd probably be jumping through the room to talk about why this is something that we must deal with and something that we must speak on. At the Lowry Institute, our mission and our mandate is to work with college students, and I work with them all day long. And let me tell you, a lot of words come up when they hear about these types of issues and the challenges where they're facing in their lives. There's frustration, there's confusion, and there's distrust. And we have to own that, because these processes, these practices that we are engaging in are creating these senses and these feelings in this ever-growing group, in this critical demographic in this state. As we all know, elections are sacred, but they're more than just sacred processes. They're part of a sacred trust. Trust in our officials, that we trust to lead us and guide us towards what the paths and the resources that we need. Trust in our institutions, that we will receive fair access and that those institutions will perform fairly. And also a trust in a process that gives us the ability to see fairness and to see the justice that we seek. We now have to restore that trust. We have an obligation to restore that trust. and to fulfill our obligations going into this election, to make sure that the young people who are working and advocating so hard on all of these issues see that their efforts are not just bearing fruit, but they're not being discarded and that they're not in vain. As we approach this November election here at the Lowry Institute, we're going to continue to work to amplify the voices of these young change agents, these future leaders, these individuals who Dr. Lowry would have looked on and trained and said, hey, we must build a better world for you. We won't be silent. They won't be silent. They're not going away, and we will not go back. So on behalf of the Lowry Institute and the Lowry family, I appreciate your efforts and your attention to this issue, and let's continue to work on it. Now, if I may, I actually have a brief, very brief letter from SCLC I'd like to also enter into the record, Senator James and committee. And it reads as follows. Dear Senator James and members of the Georgia Senate Urban Affairs Committee, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference stands firmly with you, Senator James, and others in the fight to protect the right to vote for all Georgians. The assault we have witnessed on the Voting Rights Act in our state is both blatant and driven by divisiveness and bigotry. It is clear that there are those in Georgia who are unwilling to accept the will of the people. Since they cannot win through a fair vote, they resort to dishonest tactics, attempting to manipulate the laws meant to safeguard voter integrity in order to disrupt and undermine the will of the people. We see these efforts manifest in various ways, from manipulating voter rolls to disrupting the function of election boards across our state. Our organization was at the forefront of the civil rights movement, recognizing that the first step towards equality and full citizenship for Black Americans was securing the right to vote. That is why we take pride in our role in advocating for the passage of the Voting Rights Act. We are acutely aware that the law has since been weakened by the Supreme Court. The actions we are witnessing in Georgia today are precisely why we were so outraged and concerned when sections 4 and 5 were stripped from the law. As we approach this consequential election in November, it is imperative that all of us, citizens and elected officials alike, stand united. We must send a clear message. We will not go back, we will not stand down, and we will fight for our right to vote and our right to exist with every ounce of strength we possess. Sincerely, DeMark Liggins Sr., President, CEO, Southern Christian Leadership Conference National. And with that, I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sending the comments. We do have them when we're putting them in the record. So we'll be back in touch with you or someone from your office.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see. Everyone who is still here, I have so many names on here that wanted to speak. So I know that half of them have left. So can you raise your hand? Okay. Can we have, John Moy was gonna be next right there, but can everybody else? Let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, 6, 7, sit right here and then up, yeah, come up all the way up, get you one of these mics or be close enough to a mic. Yeah, right, you can come on up and, hey, we okay, we want to be friends. Pull your chair up, young lady, over here. Well, look, yeah.
No, pull a chair.
No, pull one of these chairs up. Okay.
Good afternoon, Senator.
Do we have everybody up here first? Are you speaking? Want to come? You have to leave? Right, I remember it. So you're gonna,
Smith spoke, right?
yeah, did Neil's?
Leo Smith?
Yeah, he spoke.
He spoke.
Okay, so you're not one of the people We're gonna listen to everyone. That's why I'm trying to make sure before we let our Urban League great representative, Mr. Moy, speak to us.
Thank you.
And then, so Faye and everyone, I don't know which order we're gonna go in, but I think that whoever is closest. Oh, who is, Ann Gray Heron is on Zoom. Is it anyone else on Zoom that has been waiting to speak? I know that she was even invited from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Is she still on? Okay. So thank you for your patience. We're gonna go on and we're gonna try to make sure that we put your comments in the record. And also, I want you to know we'll be open to getting personal phone calls from you too, if you do want to talk to us even more. Thank you. So we're gonna start with you, Mr. Moore. And look, he got a little thing saying stop.
Respect
You
the Senator.
know, So
Absolutely.
he's adding it up. Wait, Senator. Yeah. Okay.
Senator, I just want to thank you very, very much. I certainly want to be remiss if I didn't acknowledge Leader Butler
Yeah,
and the other distinguished members of the
Oh.
committee. Absolutely.
she's been
She has been,
Greatly.
absolutely.
And she's the reason we're here
Yes,
today.
ma'am, that's correct.
Because she's been very concerned about this.
That's
And this is one of the major issues that she has this committee to address.
It is.
So I thank our leader for guiding us through today, because I see that it's been so much interest.
Yeah.
Many people have already, we have a lot of senators and state reps. I see that Representative Bazemore is still on, Senator Hollistina Tate is still on. Who else? Senator, Representative Rhonda Taylor.
Solomon, haven't seen you.
Yeah. Hey, Senator Shagan is always with us, so thank you, Representative. And who else?
Representative Solomon, Adesanya.
And Representative Solomon, and who else? Anyway, thank you all for being with us. Who's the lady at the top corner? She's Miss Francis. I am. But I just want to make sure she's been on ever since we came in, before we even called to order. So I wanted to recognize you on the record. So, oh, and thank you, Karen Regal from the People's Agenda. Okay, we're gonna get, go on. We have about 30 minutes before they put us out of here.
Okay, so
So
I'll make it
let's
quick.
get started. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to thank you really, again, Senator, really for your leadership in preparing this, assembling this committee. I have prepared remarks, but I thought in terms of the seriousness and the brevity of the situation, that I would take a page out of Senator Lucas's book. Senator, you may not recall, but about maybe a year or two ago, you were on the floor of the Senate. And I think you probably gave one of the best floor speeches I've heard, no disrespect to anybody here. At the time, you were talking about redistricting. And you gave this analogy, I think, either about a cabbage man or some sort of a vegetable guy. And for some reason today, when I walked in, I saw you, that just stuck in my mind. And I thought to myself, if somebody had said to citizens of Germany 100 years ago today, October 1st, 1924, Senator Halpern, that in less than 10 years that the Germany that they knew would have become this, would have been gone. Nobody would have believed it. But democracies die when good people say nothing. And I've been here for the last 2 years at this podium and other podiums, as all of us have been. And it's almost been about, I guess, death by 1,000 cuts, whether we're not funding education properly in our state for our children, whether we're watching hospitals close. Each and every way, it's been death by 1,000 cuts. And the good people sit by, not all, but many, far too many, say absolutely nothing. And I said to my wife today, she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go see." I said, and we talked about it before she was getting ready to leave. I said, what kills me is in the body politic, people have to do what they're going to do. And I respect that. And I get that. That's the nature of the game. That's what happens every day. But along the way, Senator Lucas, whether it was in the 1960s, Senator Rahman or whatever, there was always good people who stood up. Senator, there's something called the Leadership and Courage Award, Profiles in Courage that Senator Kennedy started that they give every year to people who, despite great odds to their personal careers, that they've taken a stand, whether it was Senator, the great senator, senator from Arizona, John McCain, who at the end stood up on the floor of the Senate and approved the healthcare for millions of people against his party. He took a hard but principled position. And so I'm appealing to all of the good citizens in this country who know that that's how democracies die. They die because good people say nothing. They die because we watch special interest advance their interest at the expense of our democracy. And that cannot stand, Senator Butler. So very quickly, Senator, I represent the Urban League of Greater Atlanta. Nancy Flake Johnson is our president and CEO, and it's because of her leadership in here today. So to ensure a free and fair count in our great state, top elected officials must overturn the appointed state elections board's illegal and disruptive 11th hour rules. The Urban League of Greater Atlanta, we are stunned and mortified, senators, that elected officials at the highest levels of our government apparently have chosen not to use their power to protect democracy. And even against the State Attorney General, Chris Carr, the Attorney General and Secretary of State Raffensperger has said that these rules won't survive a political challenge, or I should say a legal challenge. Yet here we are. So I want to thank you all for today's hearing, Senator Butler. I want to thank you for your leadership. We stand with the ACLU, the NAACP, and any other organization here today that stands for democracy. And as my 96-year-old grandmother would say, freedom ain't free. So I thank you all very much for your time, and I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you. And just for the record here, the John F. Kennedy Courage Award, in 1996, I won it. We'll talk about it before all of this, the Senate stuff. But I was very honored because I had worked very hard for a long time, but I'll tell you about it later. Okay, without further ado, we have one person on from the Southern Poverty Law Center, Ann Gray Heron, and then we'll start. Are you? Oh, go ahead. Miss Heron, I hope you can hold on a minute. Go ahead. Can you?
Great.
Can you give us your name and everything for the record?
Sure. My name is Anna Dennis. I'm the electoral director for Pro Georgia. And so sorry, I do have to leave in like a bit for another meeting. So thank you for being amenable. I also submitted these comments as well via email to the committee as well. So I'll go ahead and get started. Good day, Chairwoman and members. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. Pro Georgia is a nonpartisan coalition dedicated to advocating for Georgia's underrepresented and underserved communities. Our work focuses on aligning communities, culture, policy to ensure that everyone has equal access to the ballot. Pro Georgia helps to improve barriers to voting and enables everyday people to participate in our democracy. We stand on the tenet that democracy works best when all voices are heard. Vote counting is a cornerstone of democracy, yet recent attempts to undermine this process are deeply concerning. Since 2020, election deniers have pressured officials to make sweeping changes to our election processes without evidence of wrongdoing. Upholding our elections is not optional. Let's be clear. Officials are legally required to certify results, and maintaining public trust in elections is critical. The State Elections Board proposed rules to challenge its legitimacy, lack of public accountability, and risk creating unnecessary barriers for voters and election offices. Over the last 4 years, a small but vocal group has spread false claims, filed frivolous challenges, and wasted public resources. In the last 2 months alone, we've seen over 26 new rules and changes that have emerged, raising serious concerns. Pro-Georgia, we're concerned about the increased vulnerability to ballot tampering, unnecessary complications to the chain of custody procedures, reduced privacy for disabled and limited English proficient voters, and a greater risk of disruptions for bad actors and erosion of voter confidence in the process. These last-minute changes are detrimental to voters like me and the ones that Pro-Georgia assists, election workers, and election process itself. The bottom line is this: the State Board of Elections is entrusted to uphold the integrity of our elections and remain impartial. However, recent actions suggest otherwise. The board has ignored the practical expertise of local election officials, advocates, and communities, and is now facing lawsuits over the legality of its decisions. It has even had to reverse votes of an illegally held meeting. As we approach the start of mail-in voting and early voting, we should be focusing on educating voters and supporting election offices, not sowing confusion. Thank you. And thank you for being amenable to our changes. And sorry, Ann Gray.
Thank you. Ms. Ann Gray Heron from Southern Poverty Law Center has yielded to the rest of you, and she sent us her remarks already. So we'll just put them in the record. So thank you. We're gonna go. Oh. No, I went to Catholic school. We raised our hand too, so I think all schools did that. But go ahead, please. You want to yield to? Okay, hold on, please.
And after I make my comments, I'm going to have to run because I've just, got some things to do. Well, no, I ain't gonna be going home. I got some things I gotta run to do.
And tell her don't
yeah,
call people seniors, right?
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen. I am Faye Cofield. I am the Executive Director of the Evelyn Stokes Foundation, and our only mandate is the empowerment of marginalized communities. And we take that very, very, very seriously. As you can see, I am Black and I have some age on me. So I am going to be addressing this from a little bit different perspective. And I also have a good memory. I want you to understand the historical place that we are in right now. And as somebody said, and as Dr. Lowry, who I worship the ground he walked on, said, everything changes, but nothing changes. And here's what I want you to remember. On Sunday, September 15th, 1963, 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama was bombed and 4 young girls were murdered. Now, normally you would ask what kind of evil and vile people would have done such a thing. But what we have to remember is that we know the answer. And that answer is that Birmingham was in the middle of its 1963 campaign, and that they were boycotting, they were marching, and they were doing everything they could to get the right to vote. And even though it was kind of like you could vote, but you had to pass a test, we have to remember that Dr. King, who my favorite speech, my favorite talk by him was Letter from a Birmingham Jail. And he pointed out the injustice that was there, because in Birmingham, they could change the rules whenever they wanted to change the rules. They could ask you how many bubbles are in a bar of soap, how many jelly beans are in a jar. And what is going on right now is not anything any different. What we fail to acknowledge, and many people fail to acknowledge, is that from 1950 to 1968, during the Civil Rights Movement, the majority of deaths, bombings, and beatings occurred when Blacks demanded the right to vote. That is when we had Selma. That is what the Edmund Pettus Bridge was about. That was what the March to Montgomery was about. Voting to me is a sacred thing. I take it very seriously. I don't care if they are only electing a dog catcher. I will be at the polls, and to anybody who wants to know about it, I will be the first one, I hope, at the polls when they open for early voting, because I want to make sure that my vote is counted, that it is there. It is reprehensible what is going on in this state that prides itself on saying it is the birthplace of the civil rights movement. It is the birthplace of Dr. King. It is the founding ground of SCLC. We honor Dr. King. We have his center here, but yet and still, we want to play these silly games about denying people the right to vote. So let me give you a little bit of lesson. When schools integrated in 1955, those who didn't want to participate in integrated schools, they moved. When buses were integrated, people that didn't want to do it, they ran. So let me tell you this very, very importantly. We have to stop what's going on. And please don't tell me there's an African-American on the board that voted for this, because that African-American, I'll tell you that it was an African-American slave who told on Denmark Vesey. So what I want you to remember is I want you to remember Jimmy Lee Jackson. I want you to remember Viola Liuso. I want you to remember the people that gave their lives for us to have the right to vote, and that this is not a game, a partisan game. And as they said, this is what happened in Germany. And I will tell you proudly, I am old, but I will not go back.
Thank you very much for your comments. And any questions? No questions? Thank you, Ms. Faye Copeland. I know I've been knowing you since you worked for Cynthia McKinney, Congresswoman, first Black Congresswoman from Georgia, and you're still on the battlefield. Thank you very much.
More than welcome.
Okay, appreciate your comments. Now we're gonna finish.
I need to press, oh, there we go. I just need to move it a little closer.
Good
Good afternoon.
name for the record.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. My name is Hamida Labi. I'm Senior Policy NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund from right here in Fulton County, Southside College Park, and cast my very first ballot right here in this county. So since its founding in 1940, the Legal Defense Fund has been a pioneer in the struggle to secure and protect the voting rights of Black Americans. During the 2020 election, in the midst of a global pandemic, more than 5 million Georgians voted, and Black voters in particular showed up at the ballot box in historical numbers. Unfortunately, since then, certain Georgia state legislators and state election board members have made it their mission to stop us from exercising our right to vote by advancing suppressive laws and policies that disproportionately impact Black voters and other voters of color. Laws such as those adopting additional restrictions to absentee voting and the use of drop boxes, while, as we heard earlier today, making it much easier for individuals or groups to challenge someone's voter eligibility without cause. The state election board has abused its power by passing arbitrary, vague policies to thwart the democratic process and risk providing cover for election officials to unnecessarily delay or disrupt the election certification process. Georgia law is clear that election certification is a ministerial process, and election officials do not have discretion to decide whether or not to certify. The state's Election Integrity Act requires counties to certify election results by November 12, 2024. The state election board's new rules contravene these clear mandates. And the new hand count rule, as we have heard much about today as well, creates an unnecessary pre-certification barrier. It is very likely that these new rules could disproportionately impact counties with large Black populations. For instance, Fulton County is repeatedly targeted in accusations of voting irregularities. The Legal Defense Fund stands with local voting rights advocates, those who were here today and those that couldn't be. Here as we stand inside of our state's own symbol of democracy, the Gold Dome. We're here to reinforce our call for the state election board to rescind all illegally adopted rule changes that erect barriers to the ballot box. We oppose these conspiracy theory fueled concerted efforts to dismantle our state's nonpartisan election infrastructure and the intentional effort to diminish Black political power. LDF also will continue to fight back against these baseless voter challenges inside and outside of the courts. We have sent letters of guidance to local counties, providing them with guidance on how to kind of assess these challenges. And we continue to intervene in cases that seek to prevent voters from being, we are seeking to prevent voters from being illegally removed from the voter rolls. Prior to the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, amidst a myriad of Jim Crow era laws like poll taxes and literacy tests, Black communities in Georgia were largely prohibited from exercising the franchise. Even after the Voting Rights Act's passage, Black voters have been required to navigate modern suppressive measures such as long lines, polling location changes at the last minute, and voter intimidation. So to close, LDF will continue to work to ensure that all voters, especially Black voters and other voters of color, have full, meaningful, and non-burdensome access to the one fundamental right that is preservative of all other rights, and that is the right of citizens to access the ballot box and elect candidates of their choice. We welcome the opportunity to work with the members of this body to pass proactive state policies that will embrace a truly inclusive, multiracial democracy. Thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to continue to working with you all to defeat these harmful measures.
Thank you very much. And yes, sir.
Thanks so much.
And we like your comments.
Chairwoman James, Senators, I'm really pleased to be here today. I kind of got a text the other day saying, "Ooh, this meeting's going on. I didn't know what it was about. Please show up and just make your voice heard." My name's Dr. Michael Beach. I'm a retired CDC scientist. I'm an immigrant, proud to vote in every elections in the 35 years since I became a citizen. And I'm one of those older folks mentioned earlier that's now, after retirement, working as an assistant poll manager. And I just wanted to talk to you today about, first of all, a definition of gaslighting. Manipulating someone using psychological methods into questioning their own sanity or powers of reasoning. We are in an era of national gaslighting where we're questioning, are they really saying that? When I hear the state election board continually, this is just common sense. Why would you object to this? And it's layer after layer after layer. And I think it's extremely dangerous when we don't stand up and say something. I'm outraged as a voter as I feel my rights as a voter are being assaulted, as we've heard today from many other people. As we see unelected officials becoming a legislative body by fiat, ignoring advice that says, this is from the chairperson, this is out of your league here, you're not your statutory authority. I really would like to see you all think about this 90-day moratorium. I'd really like to see all of you think about what legislation is needed to make this right and fix some of this. It may not pass. We know where things are in the House, but it needs to be out there so that people like me can rally behind it and be pressuring people to make this right, because it's not right now. This is ridiculous how it's gone. You know, what I see is that at these boards, it's the most outrageous process I've ever seen. And I've dealt with rule changes before and watched this, that you can have a group of essentially people that are conspiracy theorists getting a huge amount of time to present what they have to say, repeat over and over again, debunked and disproved data behind them and everything, and there's no recourse to rebut it, fact check it, or anything. And then we go ahead and we make a vote to put it on the calendar to make a rule. This is not rulemaking. This is ridiculous when we don't have a voice here. You know, so I think it's what we have to ask is, what are they trying to accomplish? I haven't heard anybody ask what's the time, oh, sorry, yeah, what's the documentation? Is this real? Do we need this and what's the value added? And I think that's important to ask about as we move forward. So belief versus fact, we really need to, for you to develop some of these fixes. And I like what a previous speaker said, let's not cheat to gain power. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that Senator Merritt did say, ask, but he just, yeah. Yes, yes. And we do have only, can you have one question?
Oh, yeah.
And then we have to get the other, we were
Yes.
gonna end at 1:30, but go ahead.
Just a quick comment, as you're not the only immigrant, I'm also an immigrant. And I thank you for your doing your civic duty as an immigrant. And you said you're 35 years, I've been a citizen 28 years. And I can tell you that I have missed one primary in the last 28 years. So it's so important that we vote as an immigrant. Anybody listening to this hearing not in here at the Capitol or in the internet, and I want you to know, you as a citizen, as an immigrant, you need to go to vote. And that's the only way we can change what's going on in Georgia. There's no excuse for not voting because that's your right and that's your voice. And thank you for doing your job.
Thanks, Senator. I was sworn in the courthouse, federal courthouse right here. I've never missed an election. This is too important, especially these days.
Thank you very much. And that's why we're here, to try to change laws or to listen to everyone to see what we need to do. So yes, we want to go forward in the next legislative session with legislation to make improvements. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Janet Grant and I'm a resident of DeKalb County. And I serve as an area poll manager responsible for 7 of our precincts in DeKalb County. And I'm here as an individual citizen. And I'm going to forego the written comments that I made. I'll go ahead and send those to you.
Thank you.
But I did think it might be of interest, since there have been so many questions about the hand count, for you to know that in DeKalb County, we've actually been hand counting. I only learned through this process that the Secretary of State actually in 2022 came out with a memo that told counties, we know that many of you are hand counting the ballots after the polls close, and we really think you shouldn't be doing that because it is delaying the results getting to the election office, and it is interrupting the chain of custody. So there's actually a memo from the Secretary of State, but DeKalb continued to do it, and I can't explain why. And I know Michael's been involved in this as well. I can tell you honestly that it is a complete waste of time. It takes a long time, especially for an election that has a significant number of voters. You have, 3 people out of your poll team of maybe 9 that are consumed by counting those ballots, while the rest of the team has to do everything else that it takes to close down a poll and get ready to get to the election office. And I can also tell you that almost always there's issues. My count is different than your count is different than the count on the machine. And so we count over and over and over again until we get an accurate count. That machine count has always been the correct count, not the individual. And so we have human error attached with that. And we're literally putting ballots out on tables all over the place. And I think when we're concerned about a chain of custody, that's a concern. So I just wanted to share that experience with you, that it has been done. And I know it was trialed, I think, in the past in other counties, and I don't see any value to it. thank you, and I hope that you can take action to rein in this, this rogue election board.
Thank you very much. And we do have one comment.
Man, I just want to add to that. That's why DeKalb County always came in last. Everybody's waiting for DeKalb County to come in. Where's our talent? We wait and wait and wait, and that's because you all were hand counted. All that stuff.
Maybe.
And,
Always.
and everyone who commented, I hope that you have a way that we can reach you on here. That'll be personally to you only. And, because we might be asking some questions or wanting you to call us. Okay. Thank you so much, and thank you for your service to our election department, both of you, because it is not an easy thing to do. My mother even was a poll worker for a long time. When she left the school system, though, we said, well, you know, you can always still work at the poll. She said, no, I'm retiring from both, especially from elections. She said, elections first. So thank you. I know it's tiresome. Thank you. And yes, ma'am. Our last speaker.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank y'all for the time. My name is Maria de Rosario Palacios. I'm the organizing director at Common Cause Georgia, and I represent our organization's members and supporters living across from Northwest Dalton County to the Southwest, Grady and Augusta. We have members across the state. I myself am a resident in Gwinnett. I live in North Gwinnett and Buford, and so I'm really thankful for the opportunity to speak here with this committee. On September 27th, just weeks before the start of early voting, we're not that far away. The Georgia State Election Board's vote to change the ballot, county rules to require new hand counting procedures, as many allies here have spoken about today, has become a huge worry for our members. The rule is going to cause a lot of confusion. It already has. We've seen media outlets not be able to understand fully what the new rules are, and so we've been discussing, in our networks, correcting some of that information that has been publicly placed where our folks learn from the most. The rule specifically requiring the hand counting of ballots at the precinct level before they are sent to the election superintendent for tabulation is something that we are really worried about. A lawsuit was filed just a couple of days ago to prevent this rule from taking effect. We know if that new rule survives in court, election officials are going to have to count an estimated 1.5 million ballots as part of the poll closing procedure. For reference, Georgia voters casted 1.4 million ballots at the polling places on Election Day in 2022. So Georgia's voter registration elected officials, the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, and the Georgia Attorney General Office have all come out with strong statements opposing the rule changes for varying reasons, including the potential to delay results, the potential to err because of fatigued employees, and the need to retrain poll workers so close to the election. The Attorney General even went so far as to say they didn't even have the statutory authority to make this change. So this new rule adds a new burden on elected officials. We've heard, directly from folks who've seen this on a day-by-day basis already. We know that poll workers and counties are going to have to be required to pay this additional time that folks have to work to make this happen. The new rule also requires 3 election workers to remove the hand count through the number of ballots. I just want to state we already have a robust program that election workers have to do to conduct rigorous ballot accounting procedures. 1, they're already checking the number of ballots from the ballot scanners. 2, they have to provide the number of ballots from the ballot marking devices. 3, the number of ballots that have been spoiled have to be marked and documented. And 4, the number of provisional ballots. Workers are already having to research and resolve inconsistencies in the documentation process before this rule. So in short, this rule, as we've heard here today, is attempting to fix a problem that does not exist.
Exactly.
And it will disrupt and do a disservice to Georgia voters. And so I thank your committee for hearing these concerns that we have here today.
Well, thank you. Do we have any comments? We're going to end with each person making a comment. closing statement rather. And I'm going to start with our leader.
I've enjoyed the entire process. I mean, everybody made really good points. They haven't all said the exact same thing, but we all come to the same conclusion that we're trying to fix something that's not broken. So thank you all for being here this late and
Yes.
waiting all this time to make your points heard.
And guess what? We have some food downstairs so you can eat with us in 125 if you
And
want
thank the
to.
members too, because everybody.
Yeah, all the
everybody
members,
stayed.
all the members, and
Glad
thank
you
you, our,
First of all,
our,
showed
uh,
up. because
our
I know
great
there's
staff
so
from
many things
research
being done.
and from media. And yeah, Ledge Councils just left. But we're pleased that so many people
Yeah.
stayed. But thank you, Madam Leader. And I don't know if this is gonna be your last time on a committee or not. Probably not.
Probably.
Because it's, you still have to January. So we appreciate you. Senator Lucas, your closing statement, please.
The only thing that I say about all of it is thank you for coming. This is what government is about. We get elected, we come to you and ask you to vote for us. And elections have consequences.
Mhm.
And part of the problem now have been who's been elected and who's pushing all of these false narratives. Again, I hope that this hearing has a weigh in on the governor as well as the attorney general. I'm looking for the attorney general to ask for an injunction against the rule that was made by the board. The board did not go through protocol. Normally what we do in the General Assembly is wherever DNR or anybody is making rules, they were submitted to the committee which oversees them to find out whether or not there's a problem with what they're talking about doing. And then that committee takes it up. And if any legislation is passed, the committee, the chairman of the committee introduces the legislation from the committee and it goes through the process. This has not been a legal process. I don't think the county boards of elections have to follow the rule that was made by these three members. And I just want to thank you all for having and coming with the time, because it's been a long day since 10 o'clock. And stand here and giving us your wisdom on the situation, such as those who work in the polls and can tell us about what actually goes on. I go and vote early, but I'm not working in the poll.
I thank you, Senator. And Senator Merritt?
I just want to say I appreciate all the testimony that we heard today. A lot of it we have heard, but it is worth repeating over and over again. What we're getting at is we know that the buck stops with the governor. And also the attorney general needs to do his job. He can file an injunction. We already know what the state election board is doing is illegal. They are not an elected body. They are not following Georgia law. I would agree. Our county election board shouldn't even have to follow any of the rules that they have put forth. If the governor or the attorney general disagrees with me, they need to let us know. And I would say, yes, he needs to file an injunction. I would also encourage our committee to, after this, to draw up some recommendations.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to encourage our committee that we've met here.
Yes.
We've heard a lot of information, is to follow several recommendations out of this hearing, so we can give it to whomever, governor, AG, and
Where so send me your comments, then we'll
Yeah.
put it together and Diego will make sure it gets.
and the last thing, and I don't know, maybe Sydney Halper was gonna let the election work. But anyway, well, we were having a whole discussion. We find it very striking that we asked those 3 election board members to come here and they seem to have time to have all these meetings,
Yeah.
but they did not have time to come and talk to us and to the public. So that
That's-
tells you how much credibility we're going to give to them.
That
Thank you.
was- Thank you. And our vice chair of the Urban Affairs Committee,
Thank you.
Sonia Hall.
Thank you again to everybody who came and presented testimony. I think that what we are reminded of today and everything that we've heard is that process matters, transparency matters, and accountability matters. And elections do have consequences. There are actions that can be taken right here from this very building that aren't being taken currently. You've got a state election board whose mission is to protect every Georgian's right to vote. And that is being thrown into question in the way that they are acting and in the rules that they are making. And so ultimately, the crisis that we are faced with now is multi-layered. And all of the different things that each person described to us today are great reminders that this is not just a moment in time, but this is a longer, complicated effort to keep people from being able to vote over decades. So it's a strategy. And we all have a stake in this game to protect our right to vote. And so thank you to everybody who's come to claim their stake and link up with us in the work that we have to do, because we can only solve these challenges together.
Thank you very much. Senator Roman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for this incredible and so much needed hearing in this particular issues. And I just want to make a comment that, we know in Georgia, governor's position is one of the powerful position we have in not necessarily in the state of Georgia. We have a very powerful governor in the state of Georgia. And if he thinks he has a lack of authority to remove somebody that he appoint, if he needs that legislation, I'll be one to sponsor next year. If he need that power, I'm urging the governor to look into it. I'll be there to sponsor the legislation to his desk to sign it, that he can remove somebody that he appoint if he thinks he doesn't have that one. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I do thank you very much too. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank Ross Harris back there for all of your hard work in helping call everyone and make sure that we had our distinguished panel that did show up, most of them anyway. But of course, as has been mentioned already, we invited the state election board members here today because we believe that the decisions that they're making will directly harm the rights of voters in Georgia, especially those of us who live in urban environments. However, none of those members showed that except for Milton Kidd.
That's right.
Last name. And he did come and he answered our questions, but he was the one that opposed the legislation when it was introduced by Ms. King. He opposed it, and he was the only member that spoke adamantly against this, and his vote did not get the other votes of the other members on those 3 very harsh bills. So Ms. King, Janelle King did find time to explain their actions according to her that they had here in Georgia on the Fox News today. And many folks here are concerned with her tainted decision-making process and not even wanting to come before us today. So as we approach Election Day, it is incredibly clear from hearing from all of you that mass challenges and sowing confusion are a large part of the playbook of those who put this bill in to win elections this year. But let us remind ourselves that this is not a new strategy. And in fact, one that is almost as old as this whole United States of America. They've been doing it here in this state of Georgia as well. So voter challenges have historically been used as a weapon to suppress the votes of the Black citizens and brown citizens and many citizens who disagree with the status quo. So Georgia has a long history of trying to disenfranchise Black Georgians. The current effort at disenfranchisement have their roots in the post-reconstructive era, when the state leadership invoked fears of voter fraud and to justify their restrictions on the rights of Black men to vote. So today, unfounded claims of voter fraud, like election integrity, are again being used to justify restrictions on the right to vote. And I, as the chair of this Urban Affairs Committee, could not stand for this and could not hear the cries of so many of our citizens about this travesty without convening this meeting. So I thank the committee very much for being here. I thank our leader again for being right up on top of this and helping to push us forward, because our constituents who are upset don't want to see us sitting around saying, oh, twiddling our thumbs, saying, oh yeah, that's bad. We have to act. And so this is the only action that we see that we can do at this time. But let everyone who's listening know that we're very concerned. We're glad to hear the comments of many. And as you know, it was not just from one party and nobody else, but from everybody. And among other unintended consequences, we cannot even foresee yet. The SEB group has made sure that our electoral process is as difficult, confusing, and questionable as possible. And that to appease this one person who called the Secretary of State and asked them to find some votes the last election, who they clearly do not have faith in to win this election on their own merits. So they have to throw things in the pot. We hope that those who are listening and the other elected officials who will have to consider this will see that we must stop this. And if they want to bring in new legislation to change it, then bring it through the proper process in January and see if we in the House and the Senate would even consider it. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope that this committee hearing will shed light on the sheer size of what we're dealing with within the urban areas of the state of Georgia. All 159 counties, I want you to know your Urban Affairs Committee is here for you, and we will be fair and just in our recommendations. So I thank you very much. And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.